Joining us tonight is Jake Rattlesnake.
I like to go by Lord Rattlesnake or Lord Jake, most base chat of all the lands.
You don't have an argument. Present your paper or shut up.
Everyone's view is definitely inherently biased. So this is when debate becomes very interesting.
I can hear what you're saying, but then I can see that you're dressed as a cat.
I'm a dog.
You said you like to go play fetch.
I have wolf, yes.
So how does that tie into your relationship? Like, what are you looking for if you're a dog? I think that Don Jr. will be president one day. If I was a gambling man, I'd put money on that.
Founder of RattlesnakeTV, Jake. Man, I really appreciate it, dude.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Rattlesnake TV debate night. It's been a little while since we've had a debate. I pick and choose these ones very carefully these days. I like to have quality debates on with interesting topics rather than any old debates. So we've got a very good one for you. I've been lining this up for a few months. You guys might have seen that I, myself and Andrew covered Amanda's soft white underbelly interview a few months ago on the Extravaganza when she's talking about antinatalism. So I reached out to Amanda and see if she wanted to do a debate. And I thought the perfect opponent would be the most pro-natalist person that I know, which is Rachel Wilson. So guys, the rules of the debates tonight will be 5 minutes each on the clock for opening statements. And then we're going to go into between 60 and 90 minutes of back and forth. If there's too many interruptions or if it's too one-sided, you guys can appeal to the moderator and say that you would like to do timed responses or you would like to do a cross-examination period. That's completely fine. You can do that. Also, we're going to get into some closing statements at the end, around about 2 minutes each, but the opening and closing statement times are pretty flexible and you guys can pretty much sort that out amongst yourselves. We will be allowing sources, so any sort of videos or articles or whatever that you guys want to bring up, you can. So with that, I'll have you introduce yourselves for those of you who are seeing them for the first time, starting with you, Rach.
Hi, I'm Rachel Wilson. I'm a mom and I'm an author and sometimes part-time content creator, also known as the wife of the most based man on planet Earth, Andrew Wilson. Happy to be here with my good pal Jake and with Amanda. I'm excited to have a debate with a woman who, she's a pretty intelligent lady. So I've been looking for that. So thank you, Amanda, for coming and being here and being willing to do a debate on a very controversial topic that might seem like, it's a slam dunk for me, but I think Amanda's going to do her best to give me a hard time with this one. So I'm looking forward to it.
All right. And Amanda.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you, Jake. And yeah, I really appreciated reading your book, Rachel. And you're also a very intelligent human being. And it's it's actually very difficult to find somebody on the other side of the argument willing to have an argument with an anti-natalist. So I really do appreciate hearing what you're gonna have to say. Just for those that are not familiar with me, my name is Amanda Sukanik. I'm the host of the Exploring Antinatalism podcast. I've been producing pieces of antinatalist media for the last 15 years. I'm the co-author of along with the bioethicist and philosopher Mati Haira. Our book together is Antinatalism, Extinction, and the End of Procreative Self-Corruption. And I'm just very happy to be here today with Jake and Rachel.
Amazing. It should be a great debate. I'm really looking forward to it. So guys, we're going to have Bruce Buffer introduce us and then we will get into opening statements.
And now, for the thousands in attendance, let's get ready to rumble!
Okay, so what we agreed was that Amanda would go first, meaning that Rachel goes second, obviously. And then at the end, that would have Amanda getting the closing statements and the last word. So with that, Amanda, 5 minutes on the clock. Let's rumble.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Jake. Rachel, you and I come from two entirely different worldviews. I think you from a position of Orthodox Christianity and I from not only antinatalism, but atheism. And I think those details are worth mentioning because obviously we are operating under vastly different moral compasses, vastly different ideas of reality and what the purpose and meaning of life might be. And the result of that is we're going to be compelled to make very different decisions about all manner of things. The most obvious case in point being the subject of tonight's discussion, which is whether it is correct or justified or better for society to have children or not. Put simply, antinatalism versus natalism. As you well know, I will be defending an antinatalist perspective tonight. Antinatalism, simply put, is the belief that it is unethical to produce new lives, that before we have children, there is no one there in a state of want or lack or in need of a good life, no one who is screaming out to live, who is at all in a state of deprivation. It is, in fact, I believe, humanity's desire to produce the next generation, but it's just that in its final analysis. It is our desires. And these desires can really only serve to fulfill our own benefit, or the benefit of our own understanding of the meaning of what it is to live a good life, and what it is to do the right thing. We cannot procreate, I believe, new human lives for the benefit of the child. And though people may sacrifice greatly for their children, and I absolutely do not deny that or argue that specific point, procreation is ultimately entirely a selfish act. And a selfish act that comes with this incredible cost, a cost not paid by us, but by the child being produced. By bringing them into life, we roll the dice with all kinds of risks, a myriad of risks that they may face once they are alive. Many of those risks are, things that we as the living would do pretty much anything to avoid ourselves. They may experience a very poor quality of life. We do all of this without their consent. There's no contract involved. We chiefly impose, the biggest thing for me is that we impose all kinds of suffering and manipulation. And we do this at the expense of, either they experiencing all of these negatives or there being the cause of all of these negatives to their fellow human being or to their fellow sentient creatures. And, this might be something that we accept, but it might not be something that they accept. They will be individuals. They will not be us. They will be an entirely different person who may feel incredibly different about their life and the choices that were made for them. Now, while my worldview might sound incredibly false and alien to your own, I would like to point out, in fact, that Christianity itself has a long history of antinatalism or antinatalist-like thinking, or proto-antinatalism, as it's sometimes called. A great deal of the early Christian Gnostic sects, like the Manichaeans, the Cathars, the Encratites, all had very negative ideas about the ethics of producing new lives. Jesus Christ himself, as far as we know, was a child-free Christ. And Christian antinatalism, even today, while it is rare, is real. So there's nothing actually, I believe, stopping Christians from coming to something akin to the same kind of worldview that I have. I don't believe that these are mutually exclusive worldviews. I'd also like to point out one interesting case. Even though he is not a Christian specifically himself, there is an antinatalist philosopher by the name of Professor Gerald Harrison, who believes that the badness of life proves that there is some kind of God, like to roughly paraphrase his argument, that life is so bad that something, must be out there controlling it. And while the wonderful Professor Harrison and I don't share that particular argument, I think the fact that he's arrived at that point does speak to the idea that there are real possible meeting points between our two diametrically otherwise opposed viewpoints. So I would argue that quite a bit of evidence, and I believe with quite a bit of evidence to back myself up, that this line of thinking is just as much as part of your history of your beliefs as it is my own. Let me end by saying that I think if I could say anything to highlight the real point I wish to make tonight, it is that we cannot ultimately protect our children from the world. They are the world. They are all the possibilities of what can exist, what a person can become. When we have children, we have far less ability to control these biological experiments than we think. And no matter what we do to try to prevent them from seeing, believing, becoming, or playing, when we play with the emergence of new consciousnesses, we also risk these individuals becoming things that we might not like. And we don't, they will not be you, they will not be me, they will be their own individual. And I don't mean you in a personalized sense, I mean you in a more universalized sense. I just want to make that clear. When people produce new people, we are not simply producing clay to be molded. We are producing an individual, and this illusion of control that they will be us, that they will believe what we believe, that they will value what we value, that they will be who we wish them to be, is an illusion, in my opinion. They will be who they are, and they may be somebody who we don't end up liking too much, somebody who is diametrically opposed to ourselves and to the person that we would have preferred them to be. And there is nothing real that we can do to prevent that. People will be who they tend to be. And it would be far better for both child and procreator not to engage in or experience a kind of pre-rejection of themselves. And by meeting these expectations that we may have of who they're going to be. And
so that's 7 minutes on the clock, Amanda. So we'll maybe wrap it up with that.
So I would say that it is better that we do not purchase the gift of life, so to speak, for being that didn't ask for it and may not want it. Pardon me for going overtime.
No, that's okay. We did agree at the start off camera that you guys both wanted to go a little bit overtime. So, Rach, up to 7 minutes on your opening statement. Just to let you know, guys, you can, in fact, empty your pockets, and I am accepting donations here. We will read out super chats later. So all of my money that's currently in your wallet would be nice if that was transferred swiftly. So thank you very much. Rach, 7 minutes. Let's go.
Sure. I think the video I wanted to include at the end of my opening is roughly 3-ish minutes, maybe a little under. So once I get close to 4, Jake, if I'm still rambling, cut me off because everyone knows I love to chat. All right, let's go. So Amanda's view is that people's will to live is kind of a thinly veiled cope for dealing with the horrors of existence. I believe it's actually her position, which is the thinly veiled cope for dealing with the resentment of actually being arrogant enough to believe you have existence all figured out, and that you as a finite human being have the capability to see all ends and know all things sufficiently to judge existence as pointless suffering, which should have never begun and must end as soon as ethically possible. She's not just anti-natalist, but she tends to be on the more extreme spectrum of anti-natalism, which is more like extinctionism, but I'll let her explain what ephilism and extinctionism are. She kind of dresses this view up to sound benevolent and merciful and the more moral one to hold, but deeper examination is going to reveal that I think there is an underlying personal contempt for humanity, and if there is one, for its creator. So I'm going to argue against that and in favor of a pro-natalist position as the more moral one based on 2 arguments. The first one is going to be a more pragmatic argument, which is probably best to stick to, less likely to end in like a stalemate or going over the whole audience's heads and boring everyone to death. So from the pragmatic view, this extinctionist view is very untenable. And the reason is, even though I believe this rests on incorrect framing and disprovable assertions and unjustified axioms, I think that there's no current technology we are aware of that guarantees that you could end all sentient life or end all life altogether. For example, there are a bunch of species called extremophiles, which are pretty cool. And they're things that we know exist that are extremely hard, if not impossible, to kill. That would include things like tardigrades, immortal jellyfish, and something really cool called Conan the bacterium, type of bacteria that withstands the vacuum of space, extreme temperatures, and about 3,000 times the radiation needed to kill humans. There are things in the depth of the ocean that cannot even be killed with nuclear weapons. And even if you had an exploder that just exploded the whole world, which we're probably going to get to this, it's called the red button argument, you cannot guarantee practically that you could eliminate the conditions which make reemergence of that life possible, especially since these people tend to be atheist, biological determinists, and evolutionists who think that life kind of just came about with enough time under the right conditions, there's no way to guarantee that won't just happen again. And you run the risk that next time life would develop and sentient life would develop absent a moral agent like humans who can mitigate suffering. So if this were to happen, if you got rid of all humans and we just had an animal world, you would not have benevolent actors who would even have the will to mitigate suffering. You'd have an animal world that would be a predator-prey relationships. It would be pain with no medicine or treatments. It would just be diseases with no cures. It would be maximum suffering. So actually, from a pragmatic and utilitarian point of view, the smarter thing to do would be to advocate for a pronatalist position where, according to something called the World Happiness Report, which is a comprehensive study on well-being and how to enhance it all around the world, says that suffering is most impacted by people's perception of it, and that people are in reality more benevolent than people expect they would be. So people like my husband Andrew, who have proved time and again in debates with atheists that even without belief in God, the Christian worldview provides the most consistent rational means for achieving virtue, universal morality, and justice than any other worldview. So the pragmatic solution would be to encourage as many Christians as possible to procreate, thereby limiting suffering among all sentient species, since wiping life out is at this point off the table. We could also get into metaphysical arguments, and if it goes there, I'm happy to go there. I'd like to ask questions like, can you prove that there's no value in suffering when most people think there is? Or, if life has no meaning, why does Amanda derive some sense of purpose from even being here?
That's 4 minutes.
With that said, we'll go into the video.
But I would say.
Okay, so it was nice having a YouTube channel while it lasted. I really enjoyed my YouTube channel up until now.
Yeah, sorry about that. And this is not to say that Amanda's responsible for everything Gary said, but the gentleman you saw in the clip is kind of the guy who helped introduce her to her ideology, which is Ephilism. She's made a documentary, a movie about it, and has worked with this guy for a long time. And again, it's not that she's responsible for everything he's ever said, but there are some things within those clips that I think need to be touched on. I don't think we can just pretend that this is only an intellectual debate and we're only talking about philosophical ideas. I think there's a very strong reason to believe from those videos that these are people who do not, because they don't only share a worldview with us, they have a worldview that says it's permissible to do the things you just heard about if it means ultimately ending all life, getting rid of life so that there's no future suffering. And that poses a very serious philosophical question, which is why shouldn't we, the rest of us, the majority who do feel life is worth living, do feel life has meaning, do think there's good and evil, why should we not see this as a threat to humanity and instead deal with the problem of people who want to wipe out everyone else because they feel that existence is such a horrible thing? So let's kick it off with that.
All right, sure thing. Sounds good. That sounds like a good place to start the back and forths. And like I said, guys, you can appeal to the moderator at any stage if you'd like. And we'll be reading out the super chats at the end. So with that, let's kick off.
Well, I mean, I certainly can't. I don't agree with everything that In Mendham has said. This is a person that has made well over 15,000 videos. So there's the good, there's the bad, and there's the ugly. And so that is a collection of the ugly. If you watch my movie, The Ephilis, which is based on In Mendham's philosophy, it doesn't contain any of those statements. I think that sentient life is a precious, vulnerable, fragile thing in harm's way when we produce it. So all of the horrors that are possible, procreators run the risk of their children befalling when they make the decision to do this. Now, I don't, the clip that you played, most of those are statements that I've never said. So, with all due respect, if you wanted to have an argument with Gary, maybe you should reach out to him and have an argument with Gary, because those are not my arguments. Now, if you want to talk about the skinning people alive argument, I'm happy to acknowledge that. So I think I went a little far with that argument, but that was sort of the point. It was a completely, what's the word for it? you could not possibly cause sentient extinction by skinning every living thing alive.
Right.
It's an absolutely insane thing to
Right.
say. And that was
I-
the point of
yeah.
saying it, was to find an example that could not possibly exist. And it is a philosophical point.
Sure.
What is an acceptable price for no more suffering ever?
Right.
And I struggle with that. I don't think that it's an easy question to answer. Again, I answered it in an incredibly hyperbolic fashion.
We'll get
within
Rach
that
to respond to that one.
Yeah, and I don't, to be fair, Andrew and I both have had our fair share of people taking clips of things we've said that with
Yeah.
no context sound crazy and
This is the
sound insane.
internet.
I wasn't trying to do that at all, which is why at the end I did include that, because I do understand you're giving a hypothetical we're not going to have to deal with.
Right.
It's not like that's going to happen, but it does kind of illustrate for us like just how far you go compared to some other antinatalists who just
Sure.
think it's better to like plead with people to have less children or things like that. You really do think that, and I'll give you credit, by the way, because I've had this argument with other people where they refuse to take this ideology and this philosophy to its logical end conclusion. They try to like equivocate on that, and you are more likely to bite the bullet and just say, yeah, I think the ultimate end goal is for nothing to exist. Like that would be best in a world of goods, betters, and bests. Non-existence is best. So what is the philosophy behind why non-existence or at least non-sentience is best?
Sure. Well, I mean, the whole point is that the creation of life creates the existence of suffering and manipulation. And I find that to be completely unacceptable, because we do so for absolutely no reason. Like I was saying in my introduction, before something exists, it is not in need. We are in need. The things that the people that procreate, the animals that procreate, whatnot, we have a sense of utility for this thing that does not yet exist to carry on our legacy or carry on our ideas or carry on our worldview or love us, or there's something that we're getting from grabbing something out of nothing and putting it in harm's way. Now, as far as extinctionism goes, I mean, I understand it can, the internet is the internet. It is a highly hyperbolic proposal to make these arguments in. And I've definitely maybe overstepped the bounds at times, as I think maybe we all have at some point or another. But what I am pleading with the human race to consider are the harms that we inflict when we make procreative decisions. And I think that at some point humanity will end, whether it's, I think it's highly unlikely that humanity is going to make this voluntary decision, which was what I would like to see happen, where we all just sort of go quietly into that good night, through a collective act of non-procreation. And that's really what the argument that I'm trying to make. But I think now if you are not only a anthropocentric antinatalism, which means that you're only concerned with human procreation, but you're also a sentiocentric antinatalist, so you believe that the existence of animal lives or beyond is also one of the biggest emergencies in the universe, then I believe that our extinction carries with it some duties to them. And unfortunately, there's no way of undoing life without either sterilizing those lives or even ending those lives. And I'm talking about the lives of other sentient creatures. Now, I don't propose, as you were saying, we don't have that technology. Like the red button is not a real proposal. It is a philosophical idea, and it has its roots far beyond antinatalism. But I think that we need to do the right thing. We need to be thinking about that end. How do we end gracefully and not badly? Because the end of humanity, the end of sentient life, I think it is a reality that will befall living things at some point. And how do we do that with compassion? And I think that you can't do that with compassion without making the argument for what at least would be better, what at least would be the right thing, even if we don't have the tools to do that. How can that happen in the most graceful, compassionate way possible.
Sure. So that was all kind of a big plea, like, I'm not a monster. What I'm saying is actually compassionate. Just like I said in my opening, I think this is going to be constantly framed as, I'm actually the nice one. Rachel wants you all to exist and suffer. I, Amanda, care so much that I think you'd all be better off.
Rachel,
And
I don't think you're a bad person. I really
well,
don't.
no, I'm not even saying you think that. I'm saying you think one view is the benevolent view to hold and the other is a cruel view to hold. And this poses an epistemic question. How do you know that there's no reason or purpose behind suffering?
Well, look, I think that it is neither really a benevolent or villainous position to hold, natalism. I think that it is a natural thing that people fall into that most people don't think about at all. And so it just sort of happens, unfortunately, that there's, most of us are here because nobody thought about things too hard. They just sort of acted within the heat of the moment. And then, a new sentient being pops up. What was your question? I'm so sorry. Now
how do you know that there's no reason or purpose behind suffering?
Well, I think that there is a reason and purpose behind suffering. I mean, suffering for the living does build character. We have to know when something is it's a warning signal. It has all kinds of utility once we exist. The point is, there's no reason to impose that onto something that doesn't need it. Sorry, go ahead.
It's interesting too that you said you think that most of us are here because people just didn't really think about it. And I've watched a lot of your videos and I've read quite a bit of your book. And usually what you say is that the reason people reproduce is out of selfishness and because we are propagandized and we've had this idea imposed on us from a young age, that we don't have a natural drive to actually have children, but a natural drive only to have the sex that produces children. Yeah. So do you believe that? Is that
you're
accurate?
Right. I think that when we don't think about it, when we're not considering this idea philosophically, when we're just acting, I think it's mostly the sex drive in action. And then, yes, there is more of the ideology or the what I can't think of the correct word for it, but there is natalism as a philosophy all its own that some people like yourself take on. So I think that both things can be true. I think both.
So fundamentally what I'm asking here is why should somebody, if they're listening to both our views, and mine is that from the Orthodox Christian worldview, which is different than other types of Christianity, we believe that the purpose for existence is something called theosis, that you are born and created by a loving creator in his image, and that the purpose of our lives here is to prepare us for the next life, that this one is temporary, that the next one is eternal, and that it is to, through humility and love and repentance, to find our way back to God and what we were originally created to be before evil entered the world, which gives our suffering and our trials purpose and meaning, and it gives love and natalism meaning. And contrast that with your worldview, which is there is no God. Everything's kind of a biological accident. There was just enough time and enough conditions that we just ended up here. We really don't want to reproduce. We really just want to have sex. And there's, no reason to impose life, which is terrible and a net negative, right? It's all this suffering life. There's even a guy, an antinatalist, who has a channel called Life Sucks. And, I've seen a lot of your podcasts with a lot of these folks. And again, here and in your soft white underbelly interview, you come off as, well, I'm just trying to be reasonable. I'm just trying to be, I'm trying to reason with people and get them to understand it's actually, an immoral thing to do, to impose existence on someone who can't consent to it. But there's a whole lot of problems with that, and we can get into that. But why would anybody hear your view and think it's more reasonable than my view? What's the actual epistemology? How do you know that I'm wrong and that you're correct about the nature of life and that there is no creator and that this is all just a biological accident?
Well, I don't know that you're wrong in any kind of absolute sense, and my mind is always open to the possibility of being changed. But I also, what matters most is why I guess a question for you is, why are you so sure that the people that you will produce, or people with your like-minded view will accept your worldview? Because again, is what I was
Oh, I'm
saying.
not at all. I'm not at all convinced
So
of
why
that.
take that risk?
There's every chance that out of the 5 children I have, 1, 2, maybe 4 or 5, maybe all of them will become atheists. They won't believe in Christianity anymore at all. That doesn't mean that I don't still have the imperative to do what the Lord says, which is go forth and multiply, to make more image bearers of God who could potentially be good moral agents in the world. And that even if they aren't, and even if there is suffering in their lives or they cause suffering for others, that God can bring good from that suffering. So the Christian worldview says, yes, there's suffering, but God has decided that like a famous quote from Augustine, that the Lord has decided that there's more utility in that suffering and that it can be used for more good than for bad. And I don't believe that I have enough knowledge, because I can't foresee all ends. So part of this worldview that you have is that morality basically boils down to consent, which is something I've wanted to debate for a long time, because I've heard so many utilitarians and libertarians and like even liberals argue this, that consent forms the basis for all morality, which I think is silly and stupid on its face. There's you can't say that consent is the only thing. We could consent to things that are harmful, to things that are bad, even if we agree that those things are bad. So consent doesn't make it moral. So what's your basis for saying, because you guys say, right, unless you have another argument I'm not aware of, your argument is that you shouldn't bring humans into existence because they can't consent to existing before they're born.
It is a antinatalist argument based on consent, and I bring it up because it just is an argument that a lot of people conform to. I don't typically make that argument myself, because it's very easy to get caught up in, oh, but you're talking about non-existent beings and we're talking about counterfactuals, and then people get kind of lost in that. More so, what I posit is that it is a risk to create new human beings, that you may have these beliefs about, bringing more children to the glory of God, and that God will protect them, and this is what, this is what he wants, and you're a vessel for that idea. But just the idea that this might not be a reality that your children accept, and that they may come to really be quite angry at you, not happy with the decisions made for them. I can't imagine being. You're a very intelligent person, and you can see the other side of what your child might experience, despite what it is that you believe to be the correct thing. And so I just don't know how you mentally make that leap over into finding that to be an acceptable proposition. And I'm sorry to get personal. I wish absolutely nothing but
doesn't
the
bother me
happiest
at
of
all.
lives
So,
for you and your children.
well, this is the problem with negative utilitarianism to begin with. It boils everything down to all life experiences being valued with some type of scale, from negative to positive, from suffering to pleasure. And I'm wondering if you can tell me, because when I think of life, I think of life experiences usually being a mix of pleasurable and suffering, right? So I love working out. I've been weightlifting for 17 years. Leg day is both pain and suffering, and pleasure and satisfaction for me and for everybody else who's ever done a hard leg day. Can you tell me where the line is between suffering and pleasure, and how do we know where that line is?
Well, I don't think we're really in disagreement with that. I think life is all kinds of things. I don't think that it is all suffering. I think that the suffering is what has the most value weight, particularly when you're imposing it on another person or another sentient being. So my line in the sand is going to be very, very different than what your line in the sand is, or what the child that you create is going to be. It matters what that individual says, not me. I mean, what I'm saying is that, objectively speaking, that line is going to be all over the place. And before we create that new person, we just don't know what it's going to be. And we're asking them to accept this line. You know, we're asking them to say, well, like, I find leg day to be an acceptable price, but it really, I mean, it sounds even absurd to me to say like, well, I'd rather not live because of leg day, but I'm just saying that may very well, you know, be an unacceptable reality to this new person. And so why not take the fail safe? How are you so sure of the existence of a God and this being the meaning that you have to create out of your own sense of purpose and direction that you're willing to make some other non-existent individual pay that price?
Wow. I gotta say, it's a little disappointing that we ended up so quickly right at the point that I end up with all utilitarians, where they basically concede, hey, my whole worldview is arbitrary, it's subjective, it's just based on personal preference. And when you say, how can you take that risk? Well, I'll explain. It kind of goes back to Pascal's wager here, but it's a little bit even more in depth than that. And I didn't think we'd get into metaphysics this quickly, but the risk you're taking by assuming your worldview is correct, which you don't have any good foundation to believe your world is correct, that there's no creator, that there's no purpose, that there is no utility in suffering. So with this problem that you have, if life has no meaning, there is no God, there are no higher duties, then we have no reason we ought to value consent. We have no reason we ought to care about suffering whatsoever. And you cannot, your worldview basically, if you're wrong and there is a God and life after this mortal life is eternal, you're basically condemning everyone to eternal suffering if you ever got your way and had extinction. Me, on the other hand, if I'm right, at least some people get eternal well-being. Maybe a lot of people get eternal well-being. And those who didn't ended up there because of their own free will. And if I'm wrong, all we get is what, and you're right? If you're right about the world, then when we die, we just have everlasting neutrality, everlasting peace. We just go to sleep. We never wake up, and we suffered for a short, finite amount of time when we were here, but that's not so bad. So I would say that, but even more than that, even more than this question of, you know, we could always just go back to, we both have axioms and whatever, but yours are particularly unfounded because we could just look at transcendental categories like the logic required for you and I to be here and think through these things, for us to be sentient, for us to think through the logic of our arguments. Hard to justify that if there's no God. Let's go back to your red button experiment. And would you prefer to end all life, or do you just advocate for ending sentient life?
So you said a lot of things there, and maybe we'll jump back to some of those other points. But well, no, I think it would be best if all life ceased to be. Now, I don't. That's not to say that insentient life is suffering, but there is just a reality to the fact that, you know, a plant is either in a state of deprivation or not. It is alive or not, and that to me spells unintelligent design. Even if something made it, it made it, you know, it certainly didn't think about it certainly didn't have a sense of value for the sense that this thing could be either deprived or not. And I think that sucks. I just, you know, you say that my worldview is the more outlandish one, but I don't know how you can be so sure that there is this higher power. And if there isn't, then you have sacrificed the beings that you love most for the sake of your own assuredness. And I hope, and I mean this sincerely, that your children or children that come into existence do not have a poor quality of life, but they very well might. And so I just don't understand. I know I'm repeating myself, but I just don't understand how you can take that chance. The fail safe is to not play God, is to not assume what God wants, because he may very well not exist. I don't think that he does, but you yourself are playing the deity here when you procreate. So
It's actually the opposite. You guys with your position are the ones that think you're God. You have the arrogance to believe that you can see all ends, that you can take a utility calculus and decide what's moral, what's good, what's bad, that you've already decided there is no purpose to existence or suffering. You paid a little lip service, but that's not really what you believe. And it's funny because you guys will say you're atheist, but actually what you're espousing is a Gnostic worldview, that existence is a trap, it's a prison that must be escaped, that this life that we're born into is the bad thing. And when you in your opening, you were talking about early Christians. Gnostics are not Christians, they're antichrist. They are anathematized in the church. Everything about their belief system is the exact opposite of Christianity.
Well,
which
Augustine saw to that, yes.
Yeah.
He was a prior Manichaean too, so he made
Yeah.
sure that his Manichaean brothers were all killed so that a more orthodox Christianity could survive. So I don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that in your soft white underbelly interview, I know you said in there that you were kind of unemployed or partially employed. Did I hear you say that you're a caregiver?
Yeah. Yes, I'm a caregiver.
Would that be for elder people, sick people, children?
An elderly person. I'd rather not get into
Sure.
my personal circumstances.
I don't want you to dox
I don't really
yourself.
see how
I don't
that
want you to
matters.
give any details, but I think it matters tremendously. I would not want someone taking care of elderly people who thinks that life is not worth living and that sentient life should be wiped out. That seems like a major conflict of interest.
I think it's a major. I
for
mean,
you
listen,
to say that I'm the one taking the leap by saying, "Hey, I'll err on the side of a God existing." Now, it's not that I'm certain. I don't think either of us are going to say we're certain in a logical sense. But have you ever heard of the transcendental argument for God and the argument that transcendental categories prove there must be? Okay, you should probably look that up sometime. It's probably beyond the scope of this. But do you think that the laws of logic are discovered or did we create them?
I think that they're discovered.
Okay, so that would lend to the idea that something beyond the physical material world pre-exists this physical material world, that some mind had to exist for this physical world to exist. So you're not actually a biological essentialist. You're not actually a full materialist, and you don't even know it. I just expected more from somebody who wrote a philosophy book. I thought we were going to get into negative utilitarianism. I was Philbroing, I was like exercising my Philbro muscles in my brain because I haven't used them in a while because I'm usually just debating feminists who are like, I don't know, I just think like I should be able to do whatever I want and stuff.
Okay.
So I really thought we were going to get into that. So I'm a little disappointed about that. I thought there would be more than incredulousness that you don't believe God exists and bringing people into the world might be bad.
I think it's very simple. I think there's no God. I think there's ouch, and I think that there's fail safes. I think people have sex drives, and we come to have ideas about the world, and we either throw new people into those risk categories or not. We either make people believe what we believe or we don't. I don't think it's really much more difficult than that. I don't think it's much more complicated than that. I'm trying to say that it is better not to make people suffer. And the best way to not make people suffer is to not reach out into nothing and pull somebody out of it for absolutely no reason.
Well, since you've already conceded that we do not have the technology to wipe out life right now, you and I, at best, we have a few decades left in this mortal coil.
Sure.
So in the decades you have left, you get some sort of purpose from putting these ideas out there.
Sure.
You've taken the trouble to write a book. You've been making videos for almost 15 years. You're here. So what is it that you would prescribe? What are your prescriptions for what we ought to do and why should we do them? I don't want to assign
we're all those of us that are already here. Let's live out the rest of our lives if we choose to. I believe that people should have the ability to, with medical, intervention, end their lives if they decide to. But let's live out our lives. Let's not make anybody else live it, and then let's just exit it. And let's try to see what we can do in the most compassionate way possible for the rest of sentient and non-sentient life. Let's put nothing else in harm's way. as much as possible. So ending my no, we can, Rachel, we can throw the "you're selfish, I'm selfish" thing at each other all day long. I don't think it's going to get either of us anywhere. And I've done it, you've done it, fine, it's okay.
Sure.
But I don't think there's much else to say. I mean, you're either throwing things into the possibility of suffering
I'd like
or
to
not.
walk through the practical implications of what you'd like to do. So I know that you've done some work with the organization Stop Having Kids, right?
A little bit,
like just, maybe showed up to some of their events. So if you guys got your wish and you convinced most people to stop having kids, we're not talking about ending anyone. We're not talking about deleting anyone. We're just talking about not making new people.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think would happen if you guys got your way? World population it's already, I mean, if people think that Amanda's crazy and this debate isn't worth having, just take a look at the birth rates right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they're not
because
being
with
convinced
science and
by
technology
antinatalism.
and liberal,
Let's also be clear about
what's that?
People aren't choosing not to have children because of antinatalism.
No, but I'm just saying, like,
clear.
But you could argue, and I do in my book, that Malthusian propaganda has had a big impact, that environmentalist propaganda has had a big impact, that feminist propaganda of all has had the most impact in convincing women of this mentality that life is a prison, motherhood is a prison, that you're trapped, that you can't live your best life, that children are a ball and chain, that just being a baby factory is gross and weird, so this mindset in this age of new atheism and industrialism and feminism has done a lot of bad work, in my opinion. It's been more effective than I would like it to be. But let's just say that it keeps going down this path. Let's say we continue and the birth rate continues to decline and the broad antinatalist perspective takes over, and eventually we do have just a very tiny population and eventually no human beings at all. What does that mean for the rest of life on this planet?
Well, it means that human beings are either going to value being the stewards of the rest of life or not. It either means that we're going to do something to make sure that animals are not trapped in the cycle of sentience forever or for an indefinite period of time, and that their suffering doesn't go on and on and on. We're either going to value that, or we're going to allow animals to inherit the earth. Now, antinatalism is not a monolith on that subject at all. There are forms of antinatalism, like the voluntary human extinction movement, that does believe that we should allow the animals to inherit the earth. That is not my view. I believe that we should do something to.
What should we do?
I don't know. And that's, I am not, I mean, I'm trying to make an argument for what I believe is the correct path. Now, how you implement that, how you engineer a graceful exit for all of sentient kind or all of life, it's a lot more than a schmucky little artist, can figure out. And I've said that again and again and again. I believe that this is sort of something that humanity needs to take on as a future project.
So it doesn't sound like, in all your years of thinking about this, talking with people about this, and doing this work, it doesn't sound like you've solved the problem of what happens if we do succeed in erasing human beings from the planet, and now the world is just filled with sentient animal life, which does not have medicine, has no free will or any idea of benevolence or justice or charity, cannot mitigate pain at all. It would just be a world of sentient beings with predator-prey relationships.
Right.
There would be death. There would be things eating each other alive. There would be flesh-eating bacteria.
That's exactly the reality I'm arguing against. I think that human beings need to take some responsibility for the fact that that will be the circumstance that we leave behind.
But now, we've already established that you don't know of any technology that could ensure.
Well, I don't. Human beings have gone to the goddamn moon. I mean, I'm sure that if humanity as a greater whole than a couple of people on the internet arguing for this point could put their heads together, I'm sure that humanity could find a reasonable course of action. I don't. Listen, we do sterilize animals in the wild even now. we do there are certain, I mean, we unfortunately are bringing species to horrific extinction even now. I believe that there has to be ways in which we could do that in a more benevolent fashion. So I don't think that these are these are circumstances that we can't possibly find the tools for. All I'm trying to do is make the argument that this is the correct end game, that this is something that we should value, and this is something that humanity has to value and work on. Now,
Right.
yeah.
But what we don't want to do is say, espouse an idea like this and then have, because right now there's some pretty smart people out there who've talked about this. You're not the only one, I'm not the only one who's had these discussions. And as far as we know, scientists say, even if you had your red button, and guys, the red button thought experiment is, if you had a red button and by pushing it, you could explode the world or just poof it out of existence somehow. Would that be the moral thing to do? Amanda's position, she said a million times, yes, 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 she would hit the red button. Now, here's the problem. From her worldview with evolution, there is no way she could guarantee that life would not just come back, that it would come back possibly in an even more malevolent form with more suffering than what we have right now. And on a practical level, if she wants people to start trending towards depopulation, we will get the hell world I just described. If human beings cease to exist, if we end up like South Korea, which has a birth rate of like 0.7 right now, that's an extinction level birth rate. If you were to continue that, there comes a tipping point where population scientists say there's not much coming back from that, at least not to have the world we have now. It would be something else. So you take this huge risk of having a world with infinitely more suffering and no benevolent human beings, no Christians, nobody with a higher nobility or an idea of justice or benevolence or charity or helping others for no reason. You run a very legitimate risk with Amanda's prescriptions of inheriting a hell world of nothing but suffering with no human beings that have free will there to do anything to mitigate it whatsoever. So why, in the situation we find ourselves now, with the technology we have and the knowledge we have now, after thousands of years of philosophy and science and now hundreds of years of technology, why doesn't it make sense to take the most benevolent people who have a universal moral ethical code that does seem to give people purpose and mitigate suffering? When you look at the happiness index, Christians and religious people are the happiest on average. But even more than that, people who are like born sick and live lives filled with suffering say they want to exist and that they do find meaning in their suffering. Why not lean into that? Why not push for a more pro-natalist policy with less animals? Because animals have a much more suffering existence. So more people, less animals, less suffering from your utilitarian worldview. So from your own worldview, my prescription would cause less suffering, and yours would almost, don't see a way around it. I'm waiting for you to give me a way around how your worldview doesn't inevitably result in even more suffering.
Well, look, I think that Christianity has played a very large hand in getting the world to the state that it's in right now. So the idea that Christians are the most benevolent among us and they have not created a world in which people are not procreating as much as you would like to see and have created a world where all the suffering exists, I think is just patently false.
Well, you raise a great point there. I'll just interrupt you quickly to say that you're correct. Christians are responsible for things like human rights, for things like hospitals, for things like medical technology. There is no reason and tell me if I'm wrong, I've never heard an argument against this yet, but from your view, there's no need, there's no reason to eliminate suffering. There's no reason to reduce suffering. There's no need to care about consent or injustice or fix anything. If life has no meaning and there is no creator and everything boils down to preference and just my arbitrary experience of negative versus positive utils and what, there is no reason for anyone to have this greater moral ought that tells them to leave a better world than they found it.
Well, you're right. I mean, the world is chaos without this fiction that humanity is created of a god and the a divine moral theory. So I understand that, but it's just that I'm sorry, and I don't mean to offend you, but it is a fiction. It is something that humanity has created in order to give to
Can you
control of
demonstrate that?
humanity. What do you mean? Can you demonstrate it?
Can you demonstrate that my worldview is not true?
Well, I don't believe that there's any evidence of a god. I think that this is something that humanity has created to control other human beings to behave in a particular manner.
So you just admitted that the world is worse without Christians, and that the only reason
No,
you
I
don't
didn't.
believe that God exists or that
I
Christianity is
think
true is
that
just an argument from incredulity.
Christianity
You just don't believe
has
it.
won because it's
You just
killed a
find it
lot of people and
unconvincing.
it's terrified a lot of people. And I think that that other forms of morality have not really been able to have the chance. If we can
Oh, really? You
No,
don't
I
think
really
that in all of human history, other moral systems have had a chance? So you think
I
negative
think that
utilitarianism
Christianity
can do better?
Yes, I do.
Okay, on what basis?
Well, look, there has never been a negative utilitarian world, right? So I can just say that I think that a world that values difference and values the elimination of suffering, when and as far as I can see, Christians are just perpetuating suffering for absolutely no purpose other than this belief that it's appeasing some god that I don't think exists, but you do. I don't think that that's creating a better world. I just think that if anything is to be followed, it's that we know that suffering is something that people don't enjoy experiencing. So there's no reason to attach any sort of deity to that notion. There's just reason to not impose it on new animals, new people. It's just a yeah.
So you can't.
Just really quickly, guys. Really quickly, I just wanted to quickly interrupt. One second.
Of course I can't.
We're gonna get straight. We're gonna get straight back into it. But I just want to say, guys, over 850 people in the live at the moment. If you do want to support the stream, guys, the best way to do it is to just like that stream, send it out far and wide. We've also got 6,132 over on the Crucible at the moment watching this. If you send him money, he's going to buy lots of firearms like he does with Rachel's book money. Also, we've got Lawrence Anton, who is a friend of Amanda, and Andrew are going to have a debate on this. I haven't asked Andrew yet, but I'm going to assume he's going to want to do it. But so that's going to happen, guys. If you're keen for that, then I'll drop that in the comments and say line it up or something like that. But yeah, like the stream. So this goes far and wide. With that, I'll shut my mouth and you guys keep on debating.
So I was just going to summarize quickly what I heard from Amanda was she said that she doesn't believe Christianity is true, not because she can't demonstrate that it's not true, but because she just doesn't see a good reason to believe it.
Well,
but
you
even
can't
if it's
demonstrate
not
that
true,
it's real
but here's
either.
the important part:
That's
even
kind
if
of the
it's
point.
not true, it still produces a better experience of life and less suffering than her worldview does.
The idea that just because people may believe that a lie makes them happy is not really a good thing, in my opinion. I mean, there's lots of really great things that I could believe. Like, I'm going to go out tomorrow and I'm going to get nominated for all kinds of awards and all these accomplishments. And that may not be true at all. Now, it might make me very happy in the moment, but the fact that I'm profiting happiness from a lie, that's fine if that's the way you want to live your life. But whether it means that you then get to impose that same fictitious joy onto something that doesn't need it in the first place is just a little silly to me.
Well, it might be silly to you, but from your own utilitarian worldview, can you tell me why that would be wrong? Because from a utilitarian perspective, a lie that makes everyone happy and provides better well-being and more positive experiences and less negative experiences would have to be good. It would
Well,
have to be moral.
I don't know how to make this argument to you other than to personalize it. Let's say your child ends up becoming an antinatalist, okay? You've done everything possible to make sure that they have a good life, that they're happy, that they believe in God, they have all of your values, and let's say they end up being somebody more similar to to myself. Can you still justify that you were right in making the decision to have them, even though they may be in incredible amounts of pain over this realization about life?
Of course, because ultimately it is you and it would be that child who would be choosing to have that perception. So you and other people with your same worldview this is what the data says, is that people with antinatalist worldviews, utilitarianism, leftism, are notoriously more likely to be depressed, to be suicidal.
Well, yeah, because we're facing reality.
But you can't demonstrate that that's what the case is. You can't demonstrate that your reality is the true reality and that my perception of reality is false.
It ultimately doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the fact of the matter is you are saying that something that may not be true is worthy of your offspring being fucking miserable. Sorry, I don't know if we're allowed to swear on this channel, but I'm just saying you are inviting the possibility that God might not exist, that it may all be, you might be 100% wrong, and you're not taking the fail safe. You're rolling the dice with their welfare.
Amanda, you said that you believe in negative utilitarianism. So even from your worldview, if I can demonstrate that helping people believe a cozy lie gives them a better life and less suffering, you would have to bite the bullet and say that that's better than your view, which you just said makes people miserable, nihilistic, and want to self-delete.
Well, but that's a misunderstanding of negative utilitarianism, because it is not that anything imaginable that might alleviate some suffering is the right way to go. It's the argument for how to end suffering. It doesn't mean that we need to predicate all of negative utilitarianism on, convenient, happy lies. It's to try to find reasonable means of alleviating suffering. Now, listen, antinatalists, again, not a monolith. Extinctionism, not what all negative utilitarianists, antinatalists believe. There's other antinatalist philosophers like David Pearce, who believes that what we should be doing is, re-editing the human genome to not suffer. There are other. It's pretty rare. Actually, I think Lawrence sometimes makes this point that, if we could, gerontologists like Aubrey de Grey, and I think the philosopher John Harris also makes this argument sometimes, that if we could, dramatically extend human life, that there would be less reason, or maybe no reason, to have children, or that there would have to be some trade-off. So there's all kinds of other, possible answers to this conundrum. It doesn't have to be that. It is the perspective that I take on. I think it's better to just not mess with it and to end it. but yeah, there's all kinds of different answers that don't have to settle for the easy answers of, well, let's just feed people a God story and that'll make them happy.
So do you believe that there's such a thing as objective reality, and that your version is more objective and mine is more fantastical and fabricated for the purposes of helping me cope with the horrors of life?
Arguments of cope. I don't know. I don't know you all that well. I don't know if this is what you're doing to cope with the realities of life. That's an argument that I don't make ever, and that's not my point in saying any of this.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think men can be women and women can be men?
I think that we should honor what people say about their individual experiences. So if
you're
somebody
perfectly,
wishes,
so you
but
are
I don't really,
perfectly fine.
I really
So you're
don't know
perfectly
why
fine
you
with
brought up
people
that subject all of a
fabricating an
sudden.
internal reality if it makes them happy. Just
Well,
not the Christians.
I don't.
The
No.
transgenders can, but the Christians, they're silly.
I would say that you're doing a lot more harm because you're bringing new people into the world knowing that something terrible can happen than somebody who has an internal reality that might not make. Now, I mean, again, that may be a reality that befalls a child you will have. So if that makes you so unhappy, if that is a possibility that makes you, that I get the sense fills you with some level of disgust, I don't know why you would roll those dice.
No,
Why?
I didn't say it. Now listen, this is where you're assigning intent to me. You said you don't know me and you don't know about me, and I didn't say that anything about my own personal disgust or one of my children.
I just don't know
If
why
one
you
of
bring
my
it up
children
otherwise.
becomes trans and there's nothing I can do about it, I did my best, and that's how the cookie crumbles. That doesn't get us away from the fact that your argument is completely contradictory and totally incoherent, because you think that when Christians assert that a God might exist, or that at least living in such a way that a God might exist, and taking Pascal's wager is silly, delusional. You don't see it's a argument from incredulity that you don't see a good reason to believe it. You think your reality is true, but then you'll also say that if you find utility in pretending to be a lady when you're a fucking dude with a beard, that is perfectly acceptable and a fine thing to do. Please square that circle for me.
You're putting all kinds of words into my mouth. All I have said is that I think that listen, you're free to be a Christian. If that's what you believe and that's what you want to believe, that's the world.
Oh, now you're going to switch. You're going to pivot to a libertarian. Hey, you do you, I'll do me. No. You are advocating for the extinction of all life on this planet, ma'am, and you'd better have a better argument and a more coherent argument than, I don't really believe Christianity, but if a man wants to believe that he can be a woman, go for it, buddy. But let's wipe everyone out while we're at it.
Transgenderism into any of this. Why are you doing that? It's
not
the arguments I'm making at all.
I'm pointing out that this is all a facade. Your whole theory, your book that you wrote, the videos you've made, it's all incoherent. It's a contradiction. You are in mental contradiction. You can't give me any arguments for why we ought to do what you're saying we ought to do, other than you just think it's better. And you can't tell me how we're going to get there. You're like, well, we don't have the technology to do it now, but I still think we should try. And I say, what if that results in infinitely more suffering? And you're like, I don't know, I just think we should still try. It's like, if you're going to write philosophy books with people and publish them in Cambridge, I expected better. I'm just a homeschool mom with a high school diploma, and you are presenting incoherent arguments that don't work and incoherent logic here. So maybe you can express it better.
You are also espousing that there might not be a God. You're admitting that you might be wrong as well, and that if you have a child under that belief, you might be doing them harm. So I have never at any point said that I have all the answers or that I know what the end game looks like, but it is my firm belief. It is not a delusion, or is not a facade. It is not something that I am espousing for whatever nefarious ends, that it would be better if we played the failsafe, and it would be better if nothing sentient was in harm's way, that it would be better if life itself was in harm's way, because it is not running a profit, because there's absolutely no reason to do it. It is here by pure aberrant chemistry, and we value it. The living, we need it to be good. We need it to have all of this meaning that goes beyond the terrestrial meaning that we can assign to it. But if there is any doubt that might be the case, that God doesn't exist, and that if there is any doubt in your mind that a God exists, and if I am in any way correct, that all you are doing is rolling the dice with the sentient welfare of the things you espouse to love the most, then again, I just don't understand how you could possibly justify that decision.
Well, let's go back once again. and just point out that the reason you're like, I don't understand why you're bringing this up. I'm going to call it Matt Dillahunty's dilemma, right? That you and other atheists will say to Christians that it's actually not good for you guys to come up with these lies and these things that aren't true, these fantasies that you, even if they help you cope with life, even if people report more meaning and purpose, less suffering, a reason to suffer, that you find purpose in the suffering, if you're going to suffer anyway, that it's not worth it because it's not in touch with reality. But then you guys are perfectly willing to allow other people to have internal fantasies, as long as those things, for example, feminism. If you don't like the transgender thing, let's take feminism. Letting women believe that they're just like a man, that they can do anything a man can do, and that their rights do not exist explicitly at the behest of men who are willing to enforce those rights is Delulu Fantasyland. Yet you will all inevitably argue that we should continue it because it's better, because women might suffer more if we don't let them. Yet when Christians say, you can't prove to me that there's no God, you cannot demonstrate that Christ didn't rise from the dead, or that God didn't create us in his own image for a purpose. You can't, and no one else has ever demonstrated that. You just find it incredulous, and therefore you think there's a risk there in people being born. Yet when we ask people, you're in this tiny minority. It's something like, I don't know, probably 97% of all people, despite their suffering on this earth, say they prefer to live. And you're saying they're all crazy and you're the one who has the coherent view. Yet when I demonstrate it's incoherent, you have nothing but equivocation. You won't actually address the problem of how is it okay for you to grant other people delusions if it helps them cope, but not Christians? Why is it okay?
Because again, they're not creating new people. You're creating new people. I've said it a million times. You are the one rolling the risk. You haven't
demonstrated to me that more people equals more suffering. I'm positing that more people could and does equal less suffering, and you have nothing to say to that. If we continue to depopulate the planet and get rid of humans, we are left with anybody ever watch the Discovery Channel?
I think that we run the risk of there being
eating things alive
suffering without more people if we do so without some sort of plan. Right now, everything is happening. No, I know, and neither do you. Is the point?
Yeah,
the point,
if we depopulate. More Christians, more Christian pronatalism equals a kinder world, a more benevolent world of people who have a reason to be moral.
And I think that world has already failed miserably. If people,
nobody agrees with you, ma'am. Everybody who's here wants to live, except for you and a handful of other miserable troll people who are. Listen, let's just cut this shit.
They're free to live. People are free to live. What I have a problem with.
Go to closings because we're just going in circles. And what the truth of the matter here is, the only people who share this view that Amanda has are people who tend to be dysgenic, depressed, feel that they lost life's lottery. They are suffering. And when they see other people who have meaning and purpose and are joyful and happy despite some suffering, they hate it and they want to eliminate that. It makes them angry. That's the truth. If you get, and that's why I showed that video in the beginning.
Rachel, I'm so sorry.
That's why I showed that video in the beginning. You can deny it, and maybe you're a special exception. But your friend Gary, who's your muse, who's your inspiration,
you should argue with. Why don't you email him? Why don't you argue with Gary, and he can make his arguments instead of me. Who I showed a video. You are arguing with somebody who's not online with you right now.
You think he's
I'd be happy to get Gazer. I'll get big Gazer on the channel. I'd be happy to do that.
So, look, Rachel, you're making all kinds of assumptions about who I am, how I feel about my own life, what my motivations are.
You think it'd be better if you were never born. Nothing. You think it would have been better if you'd never existed?
I think that it would be better if none of us had ever been born. I think it would be better if people did not play with the sentient welfare.
Who are you to say that? Who are you to tell Jake?
Who are you to create somebody?
Who are you to tell Jake
did
it
not
would be better
ask
if he had
for
never
it?
lived?
look, I hope that Jake has a wonderful life. I hope that you have a wonderful life. I'm not miserable in my life. I hope that I get to end at the time of my own choosing. I have my sadnesses. I have my joys. I'm an artist. I'm a toy collector. I mean, I take all kinds of tremendous joys in this life, okay? But what I would not do is impose it on a new consciousness, because that consciousness is not going to be me. And the candy that I think is absolutely delicious might be poison to them. And we can't know that until we have already kicked that new sentient creature out of the plane and then ask them if they enjoy flying.
Well, here's my question to you then. Doesn't your continued existence guarantee suffering? It means if you continue to exist,
I'm already
you
here.
will suffer. Wait,
yes,
you'll suffer. And what if your suffering causes other people to suffer? What if people who care about you
unfortunately
suffer? Then don't you have a moral obligation to prevent that?
No, because I didn't bring myself here. And it's not, and once you are alive, once the decision has been made for you to exist, once somebody else has bought you the gift of life, so to speak, then there are addictions. There are things that you have attachments. It's not easy to kill yourself, Rachel. It's not exactly easy to be alive and to be sentient, to be sensate, and no matter what your worldview is, to then go and end yourself. It's not an easy proposition. All I can do
I think what you should do is sit down and do the utilitarian math. I think you should do some negative utilitarian math and figure out if the math is better if you continue to live past today or if you don't. Okay. And if you determine that the math is not in your favor, then Godspeed. Go to Canada and sign up for the MAID program, and that's it. And you will have.
Well, what I would rather do, Rachel, is argue that something like MAID be made available to all people. I have my life, while I'm still alive, has utility because I can make these arguments, and that's what I've dedicated my life to doing.
What if the rest of us who do believe in God, or we just believe that life is better than not existing, we believe existence is a net positive, and we believe that people like you are a threat to that, what if we just go ahead and decide that the moral thing to do is get rid of people who are espousing that the rest of us never exist and that our children and grandchildren never exist?
Well, I would say that you're the one making the threats and I'm not, Rachel. That's a little bit of that's quite threatening dialogue to come from you.
I'm not
look,
threatening.
My mission as an antinatalist is done, because I have put my ideas into your brain. I have allowed your ideas into mine, and that's really all I'm asking for. I'm just trying to make arguments, okay?
I want to be clear. I'm not making a threat.
It is a threat.
Let me talk. It's an internal critique of your own worldview, from your own negative utilitarian worldview.
That feels pretty external to me.
If you were to sit down and do the math, and everybody agreed that the antinatalists, and specifically the ethalists or the pro-mortalists, who are people that think that it would be better to end all life, if we sit down and do the utilitarian math and decide that you are a net negative, is it moral for us to eliminate that threat?
No, of course. Do you think that it's moral to do that?
I'm a Christian ethicist, so no, I don't. I'm asking from your.
Then why make the argument? Why not argue against me?
I'm asking you. I'm asking you to justify through utilitarianism why
you
that
are asking me to justify if it's right to murder people who have a different perspective. I'm saying that that it is best to not create new people. Don't create new people. I mean, Rachel? I'm sitting here saying that it is within the realm of possibility that one of your children could have exactly the same worldview as I do.
So
would it be correct to kill your child? I don't think so.
I didn't posit that. You are getting emotional and misframing what I said. I'm using your system. So from your system, negative utilitarianism, I have to go to the foundations of why you believe this. And we have to see if those foundations hold true. And I'm saying that if you wanted to be morally consistent from your own worldview, if everybody got together and did the utilitarian math, and she's going to just keep interrupting because she doesn't want to hear this because it's a defeater.
Go ahead.
If we decide that that this worldview is a bigger threat to us than it's worth, and we do the utilitarian math and we decide this is a net negative, would it make sense then to eliminate people who advocate for ending all life on this planet from a utilitarian perspective? Yes or no? And if no, please tell me why not.
From a utilitarian perspective, if all you care is maximizing happiness and somehow my worldview is making you miserable, yeah. But I think there's other. That's not a utilitarian, negative utilitarian worldview. My worldview is what arguments can we make that would alleviate the most and end the most amount of suffering for the most amount of sentient beings. So I'm sorry, you're the one making a very threatening argument out of what I'm saying.
I didn't make an argument. I asked you a question. I didn't advocate anything. I didn't make an argument for taking any kind of action.
But what's the point of making that kind of argument? It has no bearing on anything.
The point is to show that your whole worldview is incoherent and collapses in on itself the minute that the foundations are examined. That's the point. It's not to do harm to you.
Those aren't the foundations of my argument.
From a Christian ethical perspective, I would not do harm to you, even if I do think that you're some kind of existential threat. I wouldn't do harm to you
either.
Right.
I'm saying that you are doing harm to the children that you're producing.
I'm showing you that your worldview, and the consequence of your worldview, this belief, this insane belief you have that life should not exist, is the result of faulty, incoherent logic. And that if you were to examine the foundations of your worldview, you would find that you are not consistent and that this is irrational and not reasonable, and you would have to change it, but you don't want to change it because you spent the last 15
harm
years
your own children on a wing and a prayer.
15 years espousing this, and you can't backtrack now because then there's nothing for you.
No,
you have to double down. Yes.
You too.
That's all I've got, Jake. If you want to do closings and go to questions, I don't know where else we can go. I've already proven that this is incoherent and not consistent whatsoever.
I mean, all I can do is repeat the same things I've said over and over again.
We've got
you're making arguments that I'm not
good enough.
Okay. All right. Well, we've got 2 minutes each on the clock. We can do some quick closing statements, and then we're going to read out some super chats. Anybody who has any questions whatsoever, leave it in a super chat now, guys. We're not going to be displaying any personal attacks or anything like that. So just questions and statements, but no personal attacks. So with that, Rach, 2 minutes on the clock. Closing statements.
Okay, so in her book, Amanda sees history of Western philosophy as a struggle between pro and antinatalism, which I largely agree with. She's not just antinatalist, but extinctionist. So she dresses up this view as a benevolent, merciful, moral one to hold. But as we saw, deeper examination reveals that not only is this not coherent, and it's not a comprehensive worldview that she can give us a solution as to how we achieve this. She cannot tell me how we mitigate the potential disasters of what she's prescribing. Not only that, but it does reveal her deeper personal contempt for humanity, and if there is one, for its creator. She thinks that natalists and optimists are the ones coping, but her niche minority view is held almost exclusively by a handful of more dysgenic and depressed, resentful people. That's not to insult them. That's just to say that when you ask them, they self-report more depression, more mental illness, more resentment towards society because they feel they drew the losing straw in life. So rather than submit with humility and repentance, which would allow them to find meaning and purpose, as the Orthodox Christian view has done for thousands of years, the antinatalists embrace the Luciferian Gnostic view of creation and the creator as an enemy and annihilation of all life as relief from their suffering, imposing this view on those who are too dumb and programmed to realize that they should not want to exist. So you can see this too because her logo for her podcast is an Ouroboros, which is a Gnostic occultic symbol, which says a lot about this whole thing. But the TLDR is her position is incoherent, arrogant, loser cope that collapses in on itself once the foundations are examined, as you just saw.
Okay, Amanda?
Well, I don't know what else to say. Rachel, it's I suppose it's been a pleasure. I think you're making a lot of assumptions about who I am, the people that you're arguing against. I mean, if God doesn't exist, then you are harming your children. I don't know what else to say. I just think that it is better to look, antinatalism is writing the product review of life. And some of us that live it can see that there are all kinds of realities on this planet that we would not wish for ourselves. We would not wish for those that we love or our fellow sentient to experience. And the only way to really take the feel safe is to just simply not impose it. And I don't think that you have to be miserable to come to that worldview. You can be a Christian and come to that worldview. There's there's a large history, as I've said earlier, of Christians that have come to a similar worldview. Really, anybody can come to this view. It's not a view that is going to necessarily make you yip yip hooray happy, because reality kind of does suck. And I just look, what you are saying is the hellscape of reality if we, somehow don't keep producing children and, the animals go on and inherit the earth and there's all that. That's exactly what I'm arguing against. I may not have all the answers as to how exactly to implement it other than making the arguments. But I'm quite satisfied in just being able to make the arguments that would be the best course of action. We should value suffering. We should value the elimination of suffering. We should not produce it for no good reason. We should protect sentient existence by not producing it.
All right, guys. Well, I do want to say I thoroughly enjoyed that debate. It was really, really enjoyable. So thank you both so much for coming on and doing it. We're going to get into these super chats, guys. Once again, if you sent money and you sent a personal attack comment, I appreciate it. But we're not going to be able to read it out because we don't want to, we don't want to do that with our debaters who have come out and made their time for us. So JT, thank you for coming a member, as well as I Set the Tone. Just Gerald came in and gifted 20 Rattlesnake TV memberships off the bat, blessing 20 paws. Thank you very much, Just Gerald. Blaine Pasashik comes in with 10. Thank you very much. Just Gerald also sent another few 10s that we're not going to read out. William Elliott says, sorry, my lord, Andrew told me to send all my money to him instead. Well, dang it, I messed up. Well, if you send all your money to Andrew, you are supporting one of our debaters. So that does make logical sense. Just a smidge of support from Malngozi. Thank you very much. The next one, I can't read it out. Chase Haggard said for 5, well done, Jake. All according to plan. Here's your payment as we agreed. Phase 2 in 45 mins. This was during my tech difficulties. Okay. The cold quest for $5 says, is suffering bad / what is good? I think that is for you, Amanda.
If suffering bad, what is good?
Yeah.
Well, I really do think that is up to an individual to decide. I mean, I think that avoiding suffering is a good thing. I will acknowledge that once you are alive, you need suffering does have utility. So what is good? What is good for me? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things, but I'm just saying that is going to the answer to that question is going to change depending on the individual that you're up against. And again, once again, I'm sorry, I've repeated myself a lot during this debate, but you don't know how this new, not yet existent person is going to answer that question. And the fact of the matter is, everything might be suffering to that non-existent person. There might be little to no good that person can report to believe exists. And so you have a choice. Are you going to play with that because you believe that you have notions that that might be an acceptable risk to take or not?
Okay. At any point, if the other person wants to jump in, then that's fine as well. Blaine said he was just goofing around when he said that. And if you don't believe in demons, Gary proved that they're real. What do you think about that, Amanda? Gary demon or Gary?
No, he's not a demon. He's a human being that has some extremely some views that I think are absolutely correct, other views that I think are not absolutely correct at all. Some things that would absolutely never come out of my mouth. Some things that I think he's absolutely correct on. The clips that you played, again, I think of the good and the bad and the ugly of Mendham, those are the ugly ones. And I really don't agree with any of those. But if you'd like to argue with Gary, then you should really contact him and not me.
Okay, sure. Extended Delta for 5 said the suffering is part of human experience. Life would be less fulfilling without it. Actually, religious 10 for 10 said Rachel's arguing against all the anti-life equation with granny goodness. This is an evil ideology that will lead to self-harm and even worse, mental instability. Smash that like button from Blaine Pasashik. I would completely agree with that. Smash that like button. Kikomo says for $5, we have reproductive organs, so we were meant to procreate.
Yeah, we are biologically designed to create children. There's no question about that. Whether there are greater ethics that say that we should probably make different decisions, just because I can throw a fist doesn't, this is one of Gary's arguments that I think is a very good one. Just because I can throw a fist doesn't mean I should be punching people in the face. Just because somebody is capable of raping somebody doesn't mean that that person should go and rape. So biological ability doesn't mean that we should be taking, there's no reason why the natural is the way that we should be.
I actually wanted to ask a question about this, because I saw in one of your podcasts you said that you think that women really don't want to have children. It's not that they want the children, it's that it kind of sounded like blank slate theory to me a little bit, where you're like, oh, we give them baby dolls when they're little and that's why they think they want to have babies. Is that your view?
Well, do think that I think that the desire to have children does have an enormous cultural component to it, that we do program women to want this. They may have a biological, I think that women can have a biological drive to care for something, but I think that sex is in some ways the way that procreation is sort of candied for the human race. Like, we get that, with culture completely removed, right? This thing happens that brings us a lot of pleasure and a child emerges from it. And, culture has gone a long way into making that into the cultural mandate that it is. And there is a, I think that often women are seen as less if they don't make this decision to have children.
Okay.
Jake, I can't hear you. I don't know if that's everybody else can't.
Yeah, look, boomer tech issues are a frequent on this channel. Wayward Frequency for 5 says, it's always the atheists that complain life shouldn't exist, yet are still here quite obviously consuming large amounts of resources for themselves. More of a statement. Even Lord said, question for Amanda, was Heinrich Himmler a very moral person for organizing and overseeing the Holocaust, seeing as though it ended humans rapidly? And W. Lord Jake, thank you.
No, it was conditional pronatalism, basically. The Nazis are basically a natalist cult who believe that some people should exist and others should not. And based on their racist programs, no, he was a piece of shit.
Sorry about that. I'm sitting on like a makeshift chair and I kept like sliding, so I had to get a pillow.
I thought I saw you falling off your chair. No. Kikomo for 15 says, this reminds me of instrumentality from Neon Genesis Evangelion.
I don't know what that means.
Me neither. I'm glad I'm not the only one. Iozerd for 5 says, she'll advocate for ending all life, but she'll never say we should start with Africa or India, places with high birth rates, more suffering. Should we start with Africa and India?
Well, incidentally, the most seminal piece of antinatalist literature comes from South Africa. David Benatar is a South African philosopher. India is the country with some of the most highly developed antinatalist social movements. So, I mean, this is not a Western phenomenon. This is a global phenomenon. You can find contingents of antinatalist thinkers in almost every part of the world. So,
yeah. I mean, it's more understandable. If you're living in India, it's more understandable. Cara
Understandable anywhere, but
Massow for $20 said anti-natalist propaganda has only made intelligent people stop having children. You're creating an idiocracy.
Look, children are. How can I answer this question? Just because people may have a degree of intelligence doesn't mean that they're going to produce intelligent children. Like I said, there's
actually that's not true. Genetically is it's highly heritable. Intelligence is highly heritable.
Well, look, if I had my way, and what I've tried to espouse is a more universalized anti-procreative message. So, I don't really know how else to answer that.
Kikomo comes in and says some boomer lessons for Jake. Boomer tech lessons, I do need them. Blaine Pasashi gifted 20 Rattlesnake. He's blessed 20 paws with a Rattlesnake TV membership. Thank you very much, Blaine.
Good job,
Podcast
Blaine.
lover. Yeah, thanks, Blaine. What a great man. And a great mod as well. Podcast lover for 10 says for the grift. Thank you very much. Smoky Man grift said to take my money. Well, thank you, Smoky Man, for sending over some people to send money. Appreciate that. Kikomo says, I stubbed my toe. Damn my parents for having me. That's good. Amanda, you got to say that's funny.
Certainly not the first time I've heard it, but yeah. So why not?
Cleaner 409 for 10 says, Amanda, can you give me proof that energy, that the energy that gives life to each human would suffer less if they did not live? Question 2, would it not be better to allow life since we can control for less suffering?
Well, I'm not entirely sure I understand the question, or the two questions, but before something comes into existence, there is nobody there. So you're either dealing with nothing or you're dealing with the potential of suffering. So in my opinion, anyway, it's always better to choose the potential for no suffering. And we should do everything that we can, even outside of making procreative or anti-procreative decisions to alleviate or for there to be less suffering in the world. We should feed people, we should clothe people, we should make sure people have as best lives as they can once they're here. But the fact of the matter is there is no Band-Aid that we can put on this thing that will be as preventative as the greatest prevention that we could enact, which is to not start the problems in the first place.
John Augusta for 5 says, yes, Rachel, I love it. Get it. Jesus is Lord our King. Joff Klein says for 20, for Amanda, why do some things change when other things remain the same?
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer. I don't really believe that I have a very good answer to it. I'd have to know what exactly things that they're talking about changing and what things remaining the same. Look, I think we're in roughly the same circumstance that we were at the very beginning. So it's and forgive me if I'm like answering this in a way that is not at all what you're thinking, but like my argument is not at all that, the circumstance of life has changed. I'm not making a climate change, argument based. My arguments don't stem from environmentalism or the political situation. Like things are so bad right now that it's not a good idea to have children. It was never a good idea to have children because suffering, manipulation, have been the circumstances of living things since the dawn of living things.
Generally specific says, question for both panelists. What are your thoughts on the worldview of these atheists, of the atheists require the existence of God in order for it to exist? Maybe starting with you, Rach.
What are your thoughts on the worldview of the atheist requires the existence of God in order for it to? Well, that's basically the transcendental argument, right? That in order for atheists to justify use of things like the laws of logic, language, math, these transcendental categories that they cannot account for through strictly material means, it presupposes that you need something transcendental to even be here having the argument in the first place, and to just kind of skip over that step and start with some kind of fundamental materialistic axiom avoids the problem and just skips over like the most fundamental brick in the wall.
And I would say that it is a material universe, that these things easily exist, just are part of the fabric of reality, and there is absolutely no need for a god to exist to make it true or real. Yeah.
If atheism ever took hold of humanity, the world would really be more scary, said the Brandalorian. And Crucible Crusader said, Andrew said to tell Rachel that this was effing brutal. Lol. Laughing
brutal.
face.
He's
Myrmidian.
texting me right now, making me laugh and telling me not to laugh. So
Well, I've had the Crucible
I'm not
stream up
laughing
here.
at Amanda or Jake.
Yeah,
I'm trying
that's-
not to laugh,
yeah.
and he's texting me.
I've had the stream up here the whole time, and it's been hard because I've been laughing because of his like reactions and stuff. But anyway, I wasn't laughing at the debate. Frank J says Rachel for the W, and Trey says W Rachel, and where are we? Wayward Frequency says Rachel, is this your favorite fruit, the grape? Because that's all. I've been tricked into reading
Got
that
it.
one.
YouTube TOS joke.
Rachel just got another one. Tango down. Good job, Rachel, says T Roma for 20. W Rachel says Kieran Markin for 20. Flawless
Thank you,
victory, not one
guys.
step back, says Darkimer for 20. Congrats, Rachel, on the epic debate. Crucible salutes you, says the Smoking Patriot for 10. Thank you very much. Sebastian Knight says, Rachel, beautifully done. She conceded the argument. Andrew is so damn proud of you. Wilson squad based, magnet hand. Rachel, Andrew will tell you later. Do you think that you conceded the debate at any point, Amanda?
Hand. I was like, what's magnet hand? I haven't heard
I
of
have
that.
no idea.
It's like my kids, 6'7", 6'7", and then they won't tell you what the hell it means.
I don't know.
Like
It's
one of
whatever
those.
whatever the kids on the TikTok are doing these days. Who knows, hey? Walking Dunning-Kruger effect has been slain. Crucible shall rest easy tonight, knowing the ideology stands no more. DF comes in for 5 and says nothing. DF another 5. Disguised Loki says, clear as day, Rachel took the W and you got absolutely destroyed. What do you think about that, Amanda?
That I got absolutely destroyed?
Yes.
Well, I don't think I got absolutely destroyed. I think that I presented my argument as best that I possibly can. I did not enter this with any expectation that I was going to change Rachel or that I was going to change audience members. My mission is to make the argument. So I have won by at least the fact that I have managed to get people to think. And they've done that just by showing up. And I thank everybody for showing up and for considering the ideas, and that's fine. That's all I'm really looking for.
All right. So, where are we? So, how is advocating for the end of humanity not a threat to humans, lady? You say Rachel threatened you. What do you call what you're advocating for? So, I think that they're saying that that's maybe a bit of a contradiction there, that what you're advocating for and saying that what Rachel was saying was a threat.
Well, she was talking about specifically viewing people with my worldview, specific number of people with this particular worldview, and whether people are justified in ending the lives of people like me. So that is a bit threatening. Look, I admit that like things like the red button thought experiment, I mean, these are also very, these also sort of skirt that, but they're wielded to make a point about, and they're wielded to make a point specifically because when we're talking about that level of antinatalism, we're talking about sentiocentric antinatalism or reverse biocentric antinatalism. You can't fix these problems by a cessation of procreation alone, and that's why those arguments are sometimes wielded. But I would never make the argument that, individual people should come to some sort of harm because they disagree with me. again, I concede that I have sometimes made very hyperbolic arguments, but I am never of the opinion that harm should come to individuals. We should not be harming anybody.
Okay, well, guys, I've got a poll up in the chat as we read the rest of these super chats of who made the more convincing arguments. It's not necessarily who you agree with or who you have a side with. It's who do you think made the more convincing arguments tonight, purely in a practical debate sense. So that poll is up in the chat now. Even Lord said that this woman, Amanda, is an existential threat to everyone on this planet. A more traditional enemy would value me more than she does. As in, I think that like in a traditional war sense, that person would value Even Lord more than Amanda. What do you say, Amanda? Do you value Even Lord?
I value Even Lord. I value your your desire to continue your life. I hope that if you are thinking about procreating, that you value the potential suffering of your future child enough to not inflict it based on notions of goodness of life rolling around in your head. I think that is a threat to the sentient being that you may create. I'm not at war. So this is not a war. This is philosophical argument territory. And that's really all that's going on here.
Sniper for 25 said, I'm incredibly grateful I turned to God this year. My life feels so much more meaningful. Rachel, I have so much respect for you. Thank you for hosting Rattlesnake Man. Just take my money already. Thank you for supporting the stream. If you guys enjoy this fine debate content, it does take quite Amanda and I have been conversing for a good solid month or so about this, so it does take a lot to actually line these debates up. So if you do enjoy it, I appreciate the support.
Yeah, and let me second that. Please support Jake, because this is, it's not easy to host these kinds of things. And
true, that's
Jake does good work. So please support
I
Jake.
will also say thank you to Amanda for showing up and having this debate, because most people don't want to do it. It is a controversial position she has. So, like, a lot of props to you for coming and
especially on away soil
and making the argument. And props to Jake for coordinating outfits with me, even though we didn't.
I was going to say we're matching.
I
we're
almost
matching.
wore that color. I swear.
Oh, yeah.
We even got like the matching gold crosses and everything.
No, we didn't even plan that.
The books behind us,
Yeah, and just in case I don't get a chance to say it, Rachel, I really do appreciate you having the conversation as well. Because again, what I meant was true. Most people on your side of the argument do not want to argue with my side of the argument. So I think that this really was very meaningful in that sense. Yeah.
ChoreXD said, how could believing in a Christian God and thus following a set of moral laws, even if you were to end up being wrong, harmful? How could that be harmful? Doesn't make any sense to me. Also, I happen to like life. So Chore says he likes life, and how could believing in the Christian God be harmful?
Well, if your belief in a Christian God or in any God is going to propel you to create a new being that does not need to have happy experiences, absolutely does not need to suffer, yet may come to experience horrors in life, that's not great. I mean, that means that your belief in this deity, which most likely does not exist, has propelled you to do something that does cause harm to a real sentient creature. So again, you could. That's great that you like life. I like my life too. Let's live our lives, and let's not force anyone else to live another one.
Okay. Joel B said, suffering bad equals extinction of all humanity good. From either a Christian or Darwinian perspective, this position is anti-reality. Zealot Bruh says, Rachel, congrats on your W. My question is, can you show us your smug face? Very good. You've learned from the best, eh?
Nice.
Andrew and both have like really elastic, expressive faces.
Yeah. Venanditsa for 10 said, non-existence prevents harm, but also all joy, growth, and meaning. Since consent is impossible, either way, existence offers potential value absent in nothingness.
Well,
John.
Sorry.
No, if you want to say something about that.
No. Go ahead.
All right. John said W Rachel for 20 euros. Thank you very much. Screw Andrew. Here's some grift. Says still. Love that. Hypothetically, if God wasn't real, but Christianity produced better outcomes and an overall more joyful life, would it still be harmful to children, Amanda?
Well, I would still have the potential for being harmful to children. Yeah, I mean, I just don't believe that that's reality.
Okay. And then Henry Jones Smith said, so we should end humanity to protect it from suffering. So with that logic, would you advocate for ending people now to end suffering for good?
No, because there's different axiologies at play. There's different considerations to be made. There's the consent of the consent of the living matters too. Autonomy also matters. So again, I'm for people living out their existences. I'm just not for people creating new ones.
Okay. Not going to read that.
I did see that. Please don't harm yourself, okay? That's not the point of any of this.
I think that if there's one thing that we have over on this channel is it's a fair degree of trench humor.
Yeah.
So very, very dark humor. Amanda, let me just see. Yep. Amanda, if God doesn't exist and Rachel is causing harm by bringing children into the world, then life is bad, no? Then why don't you? I guess it's a philosophical question.
Well, unaliving myself is not going to fix the universal circumstance of suffering in the universe. So while my life exists because two people decided for me that I should exist. I have lived 42 years. I have grown attached. It is not easy to kill yourself. It's not easy to unalive yourself. I know you're not supposed to say certain things on YouTube. So I'm sorry, Jake, if I've crossed certain lines there in certain terminology. But it's not going to fix the problem. It's not an answer to what I'm saying. So look, I believe that it is every human being, it should be everybody's right to end their existence at the time of their choosing. I believe that people should have access to euthanasia. So in addition to ideas about procreation, I do think atheism does also have feelers into, or does have consequences for attitudes towards euthanasia, for how we treat animals, all kinds of other things. But again, I don't believe that it's actually an answer to the question. It's also the most, I just have to say this, it is, asking antinatalists why they don't kill themselves is the most typical response to antinatalism. So for anybody out there who thinks they're really, sticking it to us by asking that, it's the silliest thing you could possibly be asking.
Well, I will say for my own part that I've experienced 45 years on this planet, and I would say I've experienced some intense suffering. Like some of the most intense suffering that you can experience as a human being in multiple ways, multiple times. And I'm grateful for all of it. And in those times of intense suffering, when you have those existential questions, I found myself with a profound sense of gratitude that the questions of life and death are not up to me, that I do believe that those things are in God's hands, and that it's not up to me how long I live. I can only control so much of what happens to me, but that what is in my control is how I respond to those things, how I frame those things, and how I perceive those things going forward. And it can really make you into a force to be reckoned with if you let it, which is why we always say we can do all things through God who strengthens us. It doesn't come from us. And I think a lot of the suffering comes from thinking that we are God, that these things are in our hands, that these existential questions are for us to answer. I think when you have the humility to understand that you are not God, it alleviates most of the suffering, to be honest. I know that's just my personal philosophy. It's not an actual argument, but I did want to throw it out there, just my own experience.
We do have a lot more super chats to get through, so I'm only going to be reading up yellow or orange or above, guys. If it's too much, we might only read out orange or above, which is like 20 and above. So, but just quickly, Amanda, there was a great philosopher by the name of Curtis Jackson or 50 Cent that once said, "Sunny days wouldn't be so special if it wasn't for rain, and joy wouldn't feel so good if it wasn't for pain." What would you say to 50 Cent?
Oh, well, that's lovely, lovely poetry that human beings come up with. I mean, again, these are perspectives that some people have, and they're lovely and great. You know what I mean? But when you I'm sorry to keep repeating myself, but the argument really is very simple. When you're creating a new individual, they might find absolutely no poetry or solace or meaning or benefit in those words at all. Rain might be the argument for ending themselves. I mean, and that would be a bit silly perhaps, but I mean, I'm just saying that this is an entirely new human consciousness that you're playing with.
Sorry, 50 wanted me to ask that, but I'll move on.
Jake, everybody's saying there's some fellow named Made by Jim Bob and that you skipped his super chat.
I don't think so.
I don't know if you've heard of that guy, but apparently he sent you a super chat.
Well, it's this super chat was sent to me over, the one that I'm about to read was sent over 25 minutes ago, so maybe I haven't skipped it. But if I did, then I will look for it.
Okay.
But yeah, maybe the thin shoulders of his super chat just sort of like went through the cracks somehow. Airborne Animal for 10 says, if existence has the possibility for non-suffering and that suffering has a purpose, then it logically follows that it is preferable to exist than to not exist. Thomas O'Brien says, Amanda, the power of Christ completes you.
Compels you.
Compels you. Okay.
It's from Exorcist.
Okay.
The power of Christ compels you.
Oh, okay. Spudmeister says, who gets to say suffering is the singular pass/fail evaluation of good and bad? Rach, maybe you want to answer that one. Who gets to say that suffering is the singular pass or fail evaluation of good and bad?
Yeah, I actually included that in my opening. I said there's no reason for us to accept this fundamental utilitarian idea that the only measurements worth looking at are suffering and pleasure. There's good arguments to look at vice and virtue instead, or to look at meaning and purpose instead. And there's not even a good, logical reason why suffering should be considered at all. We could easily, if we're going to be arbitrary, in other words, which I think I demonstrated that Amanda's worldview is somewhat arbitrary. If we're going to be arbitrary about it, we could just say, yeah, everybody has some suffering, so what? And I don't know that there's a good reason why we must,
because there are beings that desperately want you to consider that your nonchalance at what you might impose is deeply offensive to the person that may have to experience it. So I think it is worth considering when there's beings pleading with you that they didn't have to be in this suffering state, and you chose that they must because you believe it's the dictate of God or your own ideas about good or bad, or what you're justified in.
But once again, that's not really an argument, because I could just assert that that's just an assertion. I could assert the same thing and say, but most people say they really want to live, and those beings desperately want you to consider their love of being alive in deciding whether or not to make more beings that are more than likely, far and away, probably going to want to be alive. So this all comes down to, like I said in my opening, being a very arbitrary system of, we start with these fundamental axioms that we can't ground or justify why we should start there, why these are the only metrics we should consider, why other metrics don't matter, why it's okay for a man to say, well, I feel better if I live as a woman, but it's not realistic for Christians to say, I believe in a mind or a creator that had to create this reality, because otherwise you can't account for transcendental categories. That's a better argument than just, I arbitrarily choose suffering and pleasure to be the metrics by which we decide that nothing should exist. So we're just kind of restating the arguments at this point.
We've been through this before.
Mighty Maximus for 10 says, you might be having tech difficulties, but at least Abby Shapiro didn't make another surprise appearance. It's never a surprise. She's never far away. Made by Jim Bob for $5 says, Amanda, how many generations will it take for the anti-natalist movement to get off the ground?
Yeah, that's a good question. Look, antinatalism is not going to win anytime soon. There is no point at which I have ever said otherwise. Unfortunately, even though this is an idea that's been with humanity for very, very long period of time, it's been suppressed in various ways. It is not popular. It is really only since 2006 that there's even a word attached to this philosophical view. It's really a notion that, like, has really kind of found a moment only within the last couple of years as a viable worldview, in the sense of, like, it has a place in the world. So the natalism will go on. People will continue to have children, and some of those children will be antinatalists, unfortunately, much to their chagrin and my own. And so I don't know. You're gonna, people will continue to make this argument, I'm sure, long after I'm gone, and wonder why people weren't listened to far before their own births. And it will be one of the tragedies, I think, of humanity, that antinatalism was not listened to, because there is just absolutely no reason to keep imposing this existence onto new sentient beings.
What about the fact that we just prefer it?
Well, but it comes back to what I was saying. You can't know that somebody is going to prefer it until you've already kicked them out of the airplane and asked them if they like flying.
We have thousands of years. But yeah, we have thousands of years of human existence where,
what do you think
99% of people, 99, maybe 97% of people say, yeah, it is better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. It is better to have lived and existed than to have never been born. Like, we do have a stunning track record, which is more than you've got, which is this idea that, like, just arbitrarily, what if they're born and they decide they would rather be unborn?
Well,
as you said,
about it, Rachel, but I mean, look, what do you think happens to people in most of our societies if they espouse the fact that they're anti-life and that they'd rather, some would rather not live, or, not produce new children, or that they're extinctions? I mean, you don't think that people don't necessarily have the freedom to espouse these views? So I don't know that, you can say that people self-report as enjoying this existence that's been thrust upon them, but I don't really know to what degree people are espousing that with any kind of honesty, because there's not a whole lot of room for a different opinion. You can't say that you'd rather kill yourself like, without getting put on pills and all these other kinds of things. And there are circumstances where that might be the right answer. But I'm just saying that philosophies that take a more negative view of existence are typically not, held high by either the rest of philosophy or the rest of life, because there is, I mean, it is achieving life.
Well, here's another, you might find this interesting, because we talked about this a bit during the debate, but my mother is actually an antinatalist, like a staunch antinatalist, and told me and my sister, this was her actual words, "No offense, but I really wish I never would have had either of you." Yet both of us, even my sister, who she's very opposite of me. She's not Christian. She tends more toward depression. She still says she prefers to exist. So yes, I suppose Christians could take this risk of having a child who decides that existence was a net negative for them and they wish it wouldn't have happened. But it can also be the case that antinatalists have children. There were reasons why she felt at the time that might personally benefit her, which is why she allowed it. She had an abortion before me. But then regretted it later, yet here I am, and I had 5 children who would have never existed had she not begrudgingly gone along with letting me exist. So, I guess we can all just, we can all make our own decisions, like you said, but it tends to be the case that most of us prefer existence over not existing. And I'm going to continue to advocate for people bringing more image bearers of God into this reality, because I do think it makes existence better for everyone, even for people like you. I think that people like me existing makes this life bearable for people like you, who, even if you didn't ask to be born, you are here, and we make your existence a lot more pleasant.
Well, I appreciate spending an afternoon with you. Let's say that.
Well, if you had to live in a world with only people with your belief, I don't think it would be very nice. And you could argue maybe it would end if they could figure that out. But
I mean,
you don't have the technology yet. But if you could figure that out, maybe it would end. But you don't have the technology yet, so I guess you'd all just be miserable and
well,
putting all your efforts.
I don't know. I mean,
it,
Rachel, I would be really careful with this. Antinatalists are miserable and Christians are happy, and it's Christianity that produces. There's plenty of miserable Christians. There's plenty of Christians that do horrible things. I mean, I'm just saying that whether we're Christians or antinatalists or what have you, we're human beings at the end of the day, and human life or life itself produces a lot of variation, and a lot of it is not very nice. And
do you think there's anything objective? Do you think there's such a thing as objective reality?
I mean, there are. Look, I think water has a boiling point, right? Now, if we go to a different planet, it's going to be a different boiling point. So there's always a way of arguing, right, against like something that we're sure of. So I don't ever really mean to be dogmatic about something that I believe, but I think that there are things that we can be more sure of than others. I have not seen a shred of evidence that a God exists, and so I would not.
Objective morality, though.
I think no. I think there are moralities that are better than others.
Objectively. See what I did there? Got you again. Okay, keep reading.
Real silly.
Super chats.
Real silly. Go ahead, super chat.
All right. Blaine Pasashik gifted 50 Rattlesnake TV memberships. That is 50 paws that have been absolutely blessed by Blaine Pasashik. So we appreciate that greatly. W's for Blaine in the chat, please. Guys, we're already 15 minutes over the time that I said that I would be keeping them here today. So I'm only going to be reading out 20s and above from now on. I do apologize for all the people who sent less than that, but we don't have that much time today. Chef Dylan said, Amanda, what if you're wrong and all souls are in unimaginable perpetual torture until they are born?
I mean, look, I have absolutely nothing that would point me in the direction of that being at all a possibility. I have to assume that there isn't, because there's no information, there's no evidence to the contrary of what I believe, which is that there's absolutely nobody there before we bring them into existence. There's sperm, there's egg, there's the meeting of those two things, and then there's a new human when those two things meet. And there is the possibility of all kinds of experiences once that human is born, but it is the suffering that has the most value weight. It is the thing that is most dangerous to impose. It is the thing that will be most regrettable to this new human being, especially if they come to the idea that it was imposed for absolutely no purpose and just silly notions rolling around in the heads of the procreator. So until I find out, until I'm given some solid pieces of evidence that there's some sort of fantastical world beyond the one that I have come to understand, then I'm going to, and again, I'm sorry for repeating myself, but again, until I have any shred of that evidence, that I'm going to take the fail safe, and I'm going to advocate that others take the fail safe as well.
Clem L. Kiko for 20 said, Smokey Man said he wants you to have the tribute for the week. Well, that is unbelievably generous, almost unheard of for Smokey Man to be sharing the grift. But I do appreciate that. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you to the Crucible crew. It's great to see you guys. I've been watching the chat the whole entire time, absolutely buzzing with this one. Brooke for 20 says, Amanda, if suffering makes life not worth creating, does your suffering prove life's meaning or just your resentment?
I'm not resentful of those that have created me. I'm not resentful of procreators. I am merely saying that people tend to do this thing. They tend to create new people because they have notions about what doing so is going to accomplish. And if you remove those notions, which I believe are false, that there is no evidence for, that what you're left with is very vulnerable beings placed into life for absolutely no good reason, and in effect being placed in harm's way. There is nothing in me that has I'm not a misanthrope. I'm not espousing these worldviews because I hate people or I hate sentient creatures. It is quite the contrary. I believe that it is the ultimate compassion to not play with other people's sentient welfare.
Raging Tomato came in and said, Andrew said I should send all my money here instead. Thank you for hosting. And Alex B said, good debate. Andrew said to give you my money. No, all jokes aside, if there is one thing I can say about the Wilsons, they are extremely, unbelievably generous people. Last time I was in America, Rachel randomly booked my flight back home, which was like thousands, and then other things as well, which is just almost made me uncomfortable about how much they paid for me. But
sorry to cause you suffering, Jake. I'm sorry to cause you discomfort.
Yeah, it's okay. Okay. Without suffering, there is no joy, So Made by Jim Bob for 5 says, Amanda, if your life is enjoyable enough to not terminate now, why would you assume it's bad enough to not bring life into?
Well, first of all, I think I've explained this well enough. I mean, I don't have I value my own suffering, right? Like, I value my own life. I don't want to be in pain. I don't have the means of medically assisted suicide. I don't have the means of making a death that I would find palatable and reasonable. And it also doesn't solve the problem that antinatalism is trying to argue against, which is the fact that people keep on playing with these risks. Now, absolutely, it is perfectly conceivable, okay, that if you create a child today, they're going to have a mixture of good and bad, and they may find that acceptable, but the fact of the matter is they may absolutely not. And then at the end of it all is death. And we typically write this product review of life, right, when we're like in the middle of being kind of okay. But, we don't really get to say whether it's worth it or not, or in the final analysis when we're really sick and really dying and things are really, really, really nasty. So
have you ever thought about going to Canada and checking out their, honest question, has it occurred to you that you would be interested in exploring the medically assisted option that they have in Canada, or do you find that your existence now is
at some point I hope that everybody has access to that right. So I'm very well aware of MAID, I'm very well aware of Dignitas and all of these things, and I think that at some point every life is better off being able to choose their end for themselves. I really, really do. That is my firm belief. I think everybody should have access to medically assisted euthanasia.
Now, this is another personal question that I feel compelled to ask, and you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but I'm curious because I've seen this correlation with people that I've had these discussions with in the past. Are you homosexual by chance?
What would it matter? What would it matter?
The reason I ask is because
have you had homosexual, flirtations before you had children? Like, it wouldn't matter. Don't answer that because I don't care.
Okay. Well,
I mean, you're bringing that up. You're bringing transgender. I mean, these are so besides the point of the conversation that we're trying to have.
Which is why I said you don't have to answer. But the reason I asked is because I have seen a correlation where it's like, because I used to work in the beauty fashion industry filled with homosexuals, and a lot of them were pretty antinatalist. Like when we got chatty, I would find that there was a streak of antinatalism among the men in particular, but also the women. A lot of the women were like very anti-birth and anti-motherhood, and I never totally understood the connection, but I would just guess it has something to do with their lifestyle, not including fertility. So that's the only reason I asked.
Well, they're
I didn't mean
probably
to be
they're
insulting.
probably what is called selective pronatalist, rather than antinatalist. So they've chosen for themselves not to have children for whatever reason, but they don't necessarily have a universalized perspective on procreation. I don't know. I don't know who you've met. I don't know what you've encountered. But like I've also told you, I've met Christians that espouse a pretty extinctionist antinatalist perspective similar to my own. It's a worldview that anybody can come to, regardless.
Well,
of
I
what
don't
their-
agree that you can be actually Christian. I think there's a lot of people who will, like Andrew was just debating John Fugel saying on Piers Morgan. He calls him, he'll say he's Christian when it fits, and then he'll say, well, I'm not really Christian when it doesn't align. You know what I mean? So it's like
Well, yeah,
self-claiming you're a
there's
Christian and then saying you're anti-natalist. If you believe human beings are
31,000
made,
flavors of Christianity. So
well,
we can get
yeah,
into the
but-
weeds of that, but yeah.
well, we could easily quantify that. At a bare minimum, the bar to entry would be if you are against one of the first commandment, which is to go forth and multiply. You're against the belief that human beings are image bearers of God, then you're not Christian. You're someone who uses the term and is not. So
I don't really care. I don't really care who's a Christian or not.
All
But,
right, 12 Bravo Plumber for 20 says they're both right. Rachel has 5 chances for her worldview to continue while Amanda's will end. I think this outcome is better for society.
Philosophy is not genetic. You cannot protect your children from the rest of the world, no matter what you do. They are the world. People will be what they're intellectual beings. They're individuals. Antinatalism has been with humanity for an extraordinarily long time. Just as long, actually far longer than Christianity has been. It certainly is, it doesn't promise some of the goodies that Christianity does, right? So it's going to be a lot less popular. I concede that point. But it's 5 chances at failure, unfortunately, too. So, and I think Rachel conceded that point. I don't think those are 5 chances worth taking.
I agree. It's not guaranteed your children will adopt your worldview. In fact, like from a Christian perspective, if you are a very effective Christian apologist, the odds that the enemy are going to go after your children and try to turn them against Christianity is higher than if you weren't effective at that. That doesn't determine whether or not your children. The research shows that it tends to be more often that children adopt their parents' worldview, but it's certainly not a guarantee. That's true. But the best you can do is try your best to actually live your values, to do what we do, what Andrew and I do, and try to make the best case possible and hope that your kids do follow suit. But there's always a chance that they might not, I'm sure my mother is horrified. Well, I know that she's horrified. She thinks it's disgusting that I have 5 children. She thinks it's horrific. She wants nothing to do with them. And she is not Christian and doesn't like that either. So I'm sure that was disappointing for her. I'm sure she wishes I would have, adopted her view. Although I don't know what the point of that would be, because she's just going to die alone, and that's that.
Well, unfortunately, plenty of people with lots of children also die alone. So it's not exactly an insurance plan for the rest of the end of life.
It isn't, but the odds are much less. If you have 5 kids, the odds that at least a couple of them are going to love you and take care of you is way better than having either no children or having 2 and telling them both to get lost.
Well,
so
I think end of life care, elderly care. I mean, I think antinatalism does bring up the fact that society really should take this more seriously. That people should not be having children for that reason, that there needs to be more societal safety rails in place for the fact that we do age, we do die, we do get sick.
I think that if you don't think life is worth continuing, that you have absolutely no entitlement for anyone to take care of you in your elder years. I think if you want to hire someone and they feel like the payment is worth it, or somebody wants to, that's fine. But I don't think you're
Well,
entitled to
I'm still
during your elder years.
Somebody who doesn't have children who might be anti-life still nonetheless is somebody deserving of empathy, right? Like if I was to draw a line of what is a Christian and what is not a Christian, right? Like as we were just talking about, the not siding with empathy, like I cannot understand.
Well,
I
first of
cannot
all,
understand this
empathy,
new form of Christian that is not empathetic.
well, that's not true. First of all, empathy is a nonsense term. It's made up. It's not real. It's baloney. This idea that we have to feel what everyone's feeling. Blah, 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 blah.
No,
It's
but we can
nonsense.
acknowledge
However,
that they're human
there
beings
is
and that
such
they
a thing
suffer.
as, just because I said you're not entitled, so my mother's not entitled to anyone to take care of her into her old age. That doesn't mean I'm not going to do it anyway.
Yeah,
That
I
doesn't
understand.
mean that I won't treat people who absolutely don't deserve my charity with charity. I do it all the time.
Yeah.
So I wasn't saying they won't get it. I'm just saying they shouldn't expect it. I don't think that we as people who prefer natalist policies should create guardrails for those who think that life shouldn't exist. I don't know. Like, I feel like that's up to you. I think that's when personal responsibility comes into play, and you should probably make your own plans.
Well, I think that even if you're somebody who's I mean, look, I think that everybody should get equal legal representation. I think that everybody should get equal end of life care. It doesn't matter what you believe. That's just
all right, guys. Faria1 for 20 says, Amanda said before that she doesn't want anyone to come to harm, but then might I ask, even though the answer is obvious, do you consider the preborn human when you say that you wish no harm, or do you think that abortion is harmful?
Look, I believe that I do believe that the woman should have the right to terminate a pregnancy at their choosing, no questions asked. Do I believe that there's like and I just want to say this again, antinatalists, not a monolith on this subject at all. So David Benatar would say that, and I always forget where he draws the distinction line, but he says that, like, if there's a heartbeat or after a certain number of weeks, that anytime before that, abortion is more than justified. It should be an obligation, but after that point, well, the human has some sort of interest in staying alive, and so doesn't mean we should never do it. But then there's other antinatalist philosophers like Julio Cabrera who think that it is always a manipulation of the unborn, and always unethical to cause an abortion. So again, there's a huge spectrum of belief. My co-author to my book, Matihira, and I are relatively on the same page that it is the woman's life that should come first rather than the unborn fetus that really has very little to no interest in surviving.
Big B Smalls for 20 says, why should the innate desire to avoid suffering override the innate desire to perpetuate the flourishing of the species? By what authority do you espouse your viewpoint such that any sane person should listen to you?
Well, let's assume you're a sane person. You've listened to me tonight, so I appreciate that. I have the authority. I have no authority. I am simply another worldview in the world espousing their view. You can agree with me or not. And that's just, so anyway, so there will come a point where the flourishing will be over. This idea that life is on some sort of perpetual growth journey that is just going to continue on and on and on and on is just another one of these trumped up lies that we tell ourselves. There will come a point where this planet will not be inhabitable anymore. I'm not an environmentalist, but I do think that is just a reality. It might be an inconvenient reality, but it's true. I don't think we're going to go to the stars, and I don't think we have a right to. I don't think we have a right to spread our suffering to other planets. And we should, even though it's a very unpleasant thing to consider, we should make plans for that. We should just as much as while we're alive, we may have an interest in flourishing. and building the narrative of our own lives, and doing what we can, and helping other people, and all those lovely things. We should also be thinking about the fact that this is a finite existence, universally so, that whether it's nature or technology or whatever, it is going to end. And the more that we keep that in mind, the more that we consider that, the more we plan for that, the less suffering there's going to be in the end game. And that cannot be a bad thing.
Legacy says Andrew and Rachel are merciful in trying to teach and rationalize with these degens. So much hate in her. No, quote, no one who lives in him keeps on sinning. No one who continues to sin has either seen him or known him. Jartima for 20 says Philippians 3:13 tells us to forget what's behind us and to press on. Amanda, suffering is temporary unless you choose to live it every day like you do.
Well, you can certainly put a brave face on many sufferings in life, and there are some sufferings in life that you can't. The fact of the matter is, you can only have that perspective on your own existence. When it comes to the existence of an entirely new human being, it's an entirely different ballgame, and they're not really necessarily doing it wrong. They are a different kind of consciousness than your own, with different lines in the sand to where they're suffering and where their joy is. And the only way to really respect that is to not impose on them in the first place.
Just Gerald comes in for 20 and says, after watching this debate, I'm having 12 kids. I think 12 more little mini Just Geralds would be absolutely fantastic. So go right ahead. Airborne Animal for 20 says, people do not create life. Life is not a given. God or nature creates life. Who are you to decide that God or nature is wrong? Who is actually standing in the place of God or nature?
That's a good question.
All I know is that when things suffer, it's an ouch, ouch, ouch situation. It's not a positive. There are lots of sufferings on this planet that we do not grow from, that destroy us. I don't believe that there's a God, and nature is absolutely, just like everything else, perfectly, human beings are perfectly capable and justified in critiquing nature. It is not beyond our judgment.
Just quickly, we have got the poll up in the chat, guys. We've got 770 votes in the poll in the chat. It would be cool if we could get the poll up to 1,000 votes. So if you're watching and you haven't voted in the poll, which is in the chat, about who made more convincing arguments, go and get your vote in. Chef Dylan says, why do you resent the 97% Rachel mentioned? Wouldn't it logically follow that the next 100 births will result in 97 people who are grateful to be alive?
I think that I cannot justify the existence of one miserable life. I mean, so, this is an argument that we make in our book. We sort of build an argument around the Ursula K. Le Guin story, The One Who Walks Away from Omaha. So you have a perfect, wonderful utopian town in which everything is fantastic, and everybody has what they need, and everything is just marvelous, except that in the basement you have this one child who lives in filth and misery and horror, and that is the price being paid for all of this joy. And I can't justify the existence of the one child in the basement for everybody else's happiness. How can you be happy when your happiness is coming at the cost of somebody else's misery? That is not happiness worth having.
Retrios for 50. Thank you for the big 50. I appreciate that. Retrio says, thank you, ladies, for the great debate. I would second that. It was a fantastic debate. Thank you for hosting, Jake. Andrew, sorry it had to go for the grift. Solo Ones comes in and says, Amanda, you want to press everyone's button, but Rachel suggests maybe for the good of everyone, we should push your button. You cry foul. Please explain.
Well, what? That I'm telling you not to create new people, and I'm crying foul because
I think it was more about the red button, that you said you would push the red button. And
well, again, I look, I think philosophy, if certain philosophical arguments are, they're a little bit more on the difficult. Again, I am when I make that argument, I am making it from the argument for a much wider perspective than just human procreation. I'm making it in terms of what it's called the sentiocentric argument. So if you believe that all life is worthy of or should no longer exist, then that's an argument that kind of can come into play to make a certain point. And I realize it's an argument that really upsets people and sounds very aggressive, but it's not a prescription. And first of all, there's nothing that exists like that. So I'm pushing phantom red buttons in space that have absolutely no meaning other than for the purpose of a philosophical debate. And what Rachel said was, well, why don't we target these people?
I didn't say that.
Well, how else could
That's
it
a straw
possibly
man.
be interpreted?
Hey, if we're going to do philosophy, we have to be specific. These things matter a lot. So,
yeah.
I mean, I did ask you the question of if your continued existence is going to mean more suffering for you and potentially more suffering for others, since it is within your control, don't you have an obligation to end that suffering? And you didn't give me like a really good answer on that. So maybe you could give me an answer on that.
Well, I've answered that question many, many times during this debate. First of all, I don't have the means of doing something about my own individual existence. It would not solve the problem of the argument that I'm making at all. It was
What do you mean?
it was somebody else's decision for me to exist. Once we exist, we have all kinds of addictions and attachments to the world. It's not easy to divorce yourself from the world once you exist.
But ease is not an argument. Saying it might be hard isn't an argument. Like a lot of times the moral thing to do isn't easy. So I'm saying if you truly believe this is the moral thing to do, you could go to Canada and sign up for MAID. But
that's not the way it works. So I make the argument for everybody to have access to it. So I will use my time that has been forced upon me to make the argument so that in effect, hopefully in the future, people have the choice to make that decision. But in the meantime, there's all kinds of reasons why. I mean, I'm making your argument for you, right? Like, but once people have been imposed upon, they have an interest in continuing to live. Even if they have an anti-life perspective, there's all kinds of reasons why that might be not only a very difficult, inaccessible thing to do, but that their lives may have utility. There might be to try to argue for less suffering for future sentient beings. Your people of like minds will continue to produce more people. And so I have a responsibility as somebody with my perspective to argue for those voiceless.
So it's okay for you to impose your worldview, but it's not okay to impose my worldview. And you strongly believe that yours is the moral one, but you're going to pussy out of actually defending it or acting on it.
I promise you that if I am able to get access eventually to medically assisted suicide, that I will end my own life. Does that make you happy?
No.
Okay.
But at least,
what do you want me to say?
Consistent. At least it's more consistent with your argument.
Well, in the meantime, you are going to do you are advocating that people continue to create lives that will be in need of suicide.
No one's life is in need of that. Absolutely
yes, they
no
are.
one.
Yes,
no,
they
you
are.
might
Why do you
want
think
it.
MAID exists?
You might prefer it. You don't need it.
Why do you think
MAID need it?
Well, do you believe that the terminally ill should suffer in it for an indefinite period of time, or do you believe that they are in need of a better end than a natural end? Do you believe that people should be afforded the dignity of a medical end? Do you believe, like, if you needed your appendix taken out, should you have access to what's it called? Sorry, I'm like blanking now. After almost 3 hours,
like treatment
to treatment. I mean, it's the same. It's the same logic. I mean, people are in need of if people are in a circumstance in their life where they want to exit, then they are in need of it. Of course, they are.
So your fundamental issue comes down to word concept fallacies. Things like you use a lot of philosophical terms without being semantic enough about what they actually mean to be accurate enough to get to the right conclusion. So when you say people are in need of that, no. You cannot demonstrate there's an actual need. You can demonstrate there's a preference. You can say they might prefer this. That's not the same thing as a need.
Okay, it's not the same type of need as food and water. But yeah, it's a need. I mean, if you're suffering horribly and it's something that you wish to have access to, then you are in need, and you either have that access or you don't.
No, you're in want. That's something you want. That's not something you need. And these are the this is
the same semantic shit that you're accusing me of.
No, I'm demonstrating to you that you have, in order to do philosophy, and this applies to theology too. This is how people get a lot of theology wrong. Word concept fallacies, not understanding grammar, not understanding distinctions between terms, and then what those things mean can really mess up your logic, and you do end up in contradictions and being incoherent, which is what's happened to you throughout this whole debate. And that's why you just say, I can't make a better argument. I just need to reassert what I think.
I've made a perfectly sound argument. I made an argument that you don't agree with.
I demonstrated that it was not sound, and you just
demonstrated that
and continued to reassert
we can do this back.
All right, I'm going to go for some more. There's a couple more.
I think you're incoherent. You think I'm incoherent.
There's two more to read here, and then unless another one comes through. So X says for 20, I'm unable to have a child. My heart and soul hurts. That's evidence to me that having a children is biologically, genetically encoded in us by God or by the Big Bang, whatever floats your boat. W. Rachel from the Night Shift. And ChoreXD says
Can I answer that real quick?
Yep.
There is so much life here already that needs you. And I'm not in any way saying that you're suffering from not being able to have this thing that you want or need is irrational, or your pain is real, and I'm very sorry that circumstance is causing you that agony. But please know that there are so many children and adults and animals. There is so much life here that is going without, that desperately needs you, that could really benefit from you turning your pain into not having this very specific kind of life come into your own, and caring for the life that already exists. Sorry, Jake. I'm sorry to interrupt. But
that's all right. No worries.
Yeah.
ChoreXD comes in for 20 and says, from your worldview, do you have a duty to push society and, as a result, policy towards the serialization of all people, even if this would require force or enforcement to enact?
No. There are antinatalists that believe that. I couldn't even begin to say that there aren't. But no, that is not in any way an argument that I make. It is an argument that I might make for animals in a human extinctionist scenario.
Okay. So guys, that wraps up the super chats. I would like to thank you both so much for coming out. Just before we go, where can they find your work? What sort of literature do you have? What have you got coming up? Start with you, Amanda.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much to Rachel, and thank you so much to you, Jake, for facilitating this argument. I think it was a good conversation. I know we didn't, I didn't come to this with any expectation of minds being changed, as I said before, but it was a good conversation, so I appreciate it very much. Yes, so you can find my book with the wonderful Finnish philosopher and bioethicist Matti Haire, Antinatalism, Extinction, and the End of Procreative Self-Corruption. You can find it on it's a Cambridge Elements. It's in the Cambridge Elements series. It is actually open access, so there's no reason to spend any money at all. You can read it online for free. If you do want to purchase a copy, it's available pretty much everywhere, Amazon. We have one other article that we've written together that you can find called Imposing a Lifestyle, a New Argument for Antinatalism. Certainly there's all kinds of other great antinatalist works out there. You can find me on the Exploring Antinatalism podcast channel. I've sort of been in a little bit of hiatus the last couple months because I've had a lot going on. But there's more episodes coming, other shows coming, other articles coming, both co-authored and solo authored. So I've got a lot on the way. And yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, you guys, first and foremost, if you can make it to Nashville, Tennessee in the middle of November, you can see me debate Craig on feminism. You can see Jake. He's going to have a debate. You can see Andrew debate. You can see Made by Jim Bob do a debate. And you can come hang out with the Crucible crew after at the after party. It's going to be super fun. Everybody's going to have a great time. So, just put off your suffering for a little bit and actually have some fun and enjoy life a little bit with us. If you can make it to Nashville, get your tickets right now. They're probably going to sell out. Want to make sure that you can make it. You can buy my book on Amazon. It's Occult Feminism, The Secret History of Women's Liberation. You can also read some of my articles and essays on my Substack, rwilson.substack.com. And I want to thank Jake for putting this together. It was a great idea. And I want to thank Amanda for being here and participating, and all of you for watching. Thanks so much.
Amazing. Well, we're going to be raiding over to the Crucible. Thank you so much to the Crucible crew for all the support tonight. Absolutely unbelievable. Really is encouraging for me to put on more of these high-level debates. So lots more of those are going to be happening. And with that, take care. From all of us here at Rattlesnake TV to all of you out there in Rattlesnake TV land, see you later, guys.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.